Good morning and welcome to the Public Service Commission of South Carolina. It is Tuesday, June 25th, 2024 at 10 a.m. We are here for a hearing in docket number 2024-1-E. I note for the record that all commissioners are present in the hearing room. I think. I'm going to recognize our staff counsel, Mr. Russell, to read the docket.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Commissioners, Council, and representatives of the parties. We're here today for a proceeding in docket number 2024-1-E, the annual review of base rates for fuel costs of Duke Energy Progress, LLC. This matter has been noticed by the Commission for today, June 25th, 2024 at 10 a.m. I believe all parties participating in the matter are available and the docket is in order, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. Let's take appearances from the parties. Who's representing Duke Energy Progress?
Good morning, Chair Belzer, Vice Chair Powers, members of the Commission. My name is Katie Brown. I'm in-house counsel for Duke Energy Progress. Here with me this morning, my co-counsel is Lyle Trawick from the law firm Robinson Gray.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Intervenor, Nucor Steel, South Carolina.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. I'm Rob Smith with Moore & Van Allen, and I'm joined virtually by Mike Lavanga with Stone, Matthias, Sinopolis, and Brew, and we're here on behalf of Nucor Steel.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. And the Office of Regulatory Staff.
Good morning, Chair Belzer, Vice Chair Powers, and members of the Commission. Donna Rainey on behalf of ORS, and with me today is Cassidy Murphy.
Thank you, Ms. Rainey. Are there any preliminary matters that we need to take up before we begin? Hearing none, Ms. Brown, Mr. Trawick, I recognize you to present your case.
Chair Belzer, the company would first call Mr. Tom Simrell and Mr. Kevin Houston as a panel. Mr. Simrell will testify about the company's nuclear power plant operations, and Mr. Houston will testify about the company's nuclear fuel procurement practices.
Raise your right hand, please, ma'am. Do you swear affirm the testimony you're about to give to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Mr. Simrell, would you please state your name for the record? By whom are you employed?
Please make sure that microphone is on, Mr. Simrell. Thank you, it's on.
Mr. Simrell, can you please state your name again for the record?
Tom Simrell.
Thank you. By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm the Senior Vice President of Nuclear Operations for Duke Energy Corporation.
How long have you worked in the nuclear industry?
Over 38 years.
What's your educational background?
I have a Bachelor of Science degree in Mechanical Engineering from Clemson University, and I received a Senior Reactor Operator license from Catawba Nuclear Station.
Please describe any prior roles you have held that are relevant to this proceeding.
I began my nuclear career as an engineer at Catawba Nuclear Station. I then served in a variety of leadership positions at Catawba in operations and engineering before becoming operations superintendent at McGuire Nuclear Station. I transferred back to Catawba to serve as the operations manager, then plant manager, then site vice president before assuming my current role in January of 2023.
Please describe your current responsibilities at the company.
I'm responsible for providing oversight for the safe and reliable operation of Duke Energy's nuclear stations in North Carolina. I'm also involved in the operations of Duke Energy's other nuclear stations, including DEP's Robinson Nuclear Plant located in Darlington County, South Carolina.
Chair Belzer, based upon Mr. Simrell's extensive experience, I move to qualify this witness as an expert in the field of nuclear power plant operations.
Parties, are there any questions of Wadir regarding this witness's expertise? Hearing none, we will accept Mr. Simrell as an expert in the area of nuclear plant operations. Did I
Thank
say that right?
I said nuclear power plant operations.
Nuclear power plant operations, thank you.
Thank you, Chair Belzer. Mr. Simrel, did you prepare or cause to be prepared 11 pages of direct testimony that were pre-filed with the commission in this proceeding?
Yes, I did.
If I asked you the same questions that were asked in your pre-filed direct testimony, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Chair Belzer, I would ask that Mr. Simrel's pre-filed direct testimony be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Simrel's pre-filed direct testimony will be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Simrel, did you also prepare or cause to be prepared 2 publicly filed exhibits that were attached to your pre-filed direct testimony?
Yes, I did.
Do you have any changes to those exhibits at this time?
No, I do not.
Chair Belzer, I would ask that Mr. Simrel's 2 publicly filed exhibits be entered, I guess, as the first composite hearing exhibit.
Mr. Simrel's exhibits, Simrel Exhibit 1 and Simrel Exhibit 2 will be a composite exhibit marked for identification as hearing exhibit number 1 and received into the evidence of this case.
Mr. Simrel, did you also prepare or cause to be prepared 1 confidentially filed exhibit that was attached to your pre-filed direct testimony?
Yes, I did.
Do you have any changes to that exhibit at this time?
No, I do not.
Chair Belzer, I would ask that Mr. Simrel's confidentially filed exhibit be entered as the next hearing exhibit and that it remain under seal. The confidential treatment was granted by order number 2024-334.
Mr. Simrel's exhibit that was marked Simrel Exhibit 3 was granted confidential treatment by earlier order, will be marked for identification as hearing exhibit number 2 and received into the record of this case and confidential, and will remain under seal as confidential.
Thank you. Mr. Simrel, would you please provide a summary of your direct testimony at this time?
Yes, ma'am. The purpose of my testimony is to describe and discuss the performance of the Brunswick, Harris, and Robinson nuclear plants for the period of March 1st, 2023 through February 29th, 2024. DEP's primary objective is to safely provide reliable and cost-effective electricity to our customers. Safe and efficient operation of our nuclear facilities supports fulfillment of this objective. DEP operated its nuclear plants in a reasonable and prudent manner during the review period and achieved an actual system average capacity factor of 98.80% while providing 51.2% of the total power generated. 1 refueling outage and 2 non-refueling outages were completed during the review period. Brunswick Unit 1's refueling outage started on February 11th, 2024. The unit returned to service on March 14th, 2024, a duration of 31.3 days compared to a scheduled allocation of 32 days. Brunswick Unit 1 was offline for 4.3 days in April of 2023 to address an issue with the main and backup power supplies for the turbine protection system. Robinson was offline for 2.3 days in June 2023 when a switch mounting support flexed on the Bravo reactor trip bypass breaker during testing, which caused the switch to not operate as designed. In general, refueling and maintenance requirements impact the availability of our nuclear plants. DEP's nuclear plants achieved a net capacity factor of 101.79%, excluding reasonable outage time. The performance of the fleet supports DEP's continued commitment to achieving high performance without compromising safety and reliability. This concludes my testimony summary.
Thank you, Mr. Simrel. Mr. Houston, would you please state your name for the record?
Kevin Houston.
By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I am the Director of Nuclear Engineering for Duke Energy Progress and Duke Energy Carolinas.
How long have you worked in the nuclear industry?
Approximately 30 years.
What is your educational background?
I have a Bachelor of Science degree in Nuclear Engineering from the University of Florida and a Master's degree in Nuclear Engineering from North Carolina State University. I'm a registered professional engineer in the state of North Carolina.
Are you involved in any organizations that are relevant to your testimony?
I have served as chairman of the Nuclear Energy Institute's Utility Fuel Committee from 2017 through 2020.
Please describe any prior roles that you have held that are relevant to your testimony in this proceeding.
I have held a variety of roles within the company, including as an engineer in the nuclear design group and also in the fuel fabrication and enrichment procurement group. I've also held managerial roles related to the purchasing of uranium, conversion services, enrichment services, fuel fabrication services, spent fuel management, and dry fuel storage. I assumed my current role in March of 2022.
Please describe your current responsibilities at the company.
I'm responsible for nuclear fuel procurement, spent fuel management, and dry storage, and reactor core design for nuclear units owned and operated by DEC and DEP.
Chair Balzer, based on Mr. Houston's extensive experience in matters related to nuclear fuel and nuclear fuel procurement, I move to qualify Mr. Houston as an expert in the field of nuclear fuel procurement.
Is there any voir dire or questions regarding the witness's expertise? Hearing none, the commission will accept the witness as an expert in nuclear fuel procurement.
Thank you, Chair Balzer. Mr. Houston, did you prepare, cause to be prepared, 8 pages of direct testimony that were pre-filed with the commission in this proceeding?
Yes, I did.
If I asked you the questions that were asked in your pre-filed direct testimony today, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Madam Chair, I would ask that Mr. Houston's pre-filed direct testimony be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Houston's pre-filed direct testimony will be entered into the record as if given from the stand.
Thank you. Mr. Houston, did you also prepare or cause to be prepared 2 exhibits that were attached to your pre-filed direct testimony?
Yes, I did.
Do you have any changes to those exhibits at this time?
No.
Madam Chair, I would ask that Mr. Houston's 2 pre-filed exhibits be entered as the next composite hearing exhibit.
Mr. Houston's pre-filed exhibits, which are marked Houston Exhibit 1 and Houston Exhibit 2, will be a composite exhibit marked for identification as hearing exhibit number 3 and entered into the evidence of this case.
Thank you, Chair Balzer. Mr. Houston, would you please provide a summary of your testimony at this time?
Yes, the purpose of my testimony is to 1, provide information regarding DEP's nuclear fuel purchasing practices, provide costs for the March 1st, 2023 through February 29th, 2024 review period, and describe the changes forthcoming for the August 1st, 2024 through July 31st, 2025 billing period. DEP's nuclear fuel procurement practices involve computing near and long-term consumption forecasts, establishing nuclear system inventory levels, projecting required annual fuel purchases, requesting proposals from qualified suppliers, negotiating a portfolio of long-term contracts from diverse sources of supply, and monitoring deliveries against contract commitments. For uranium concentrates, conversion, and enrichment services, DEP relies extensively on long-term contracts, which are used throughout the industry to cover the largest portion of its forward requirements. By staggering long-term contracts over time, DEP's purchases within a given year consist of a blend of contract prices negotiated at many different periods in the market, which has the effect of smoothing out DEP's exposure to price volatility. Diversifying fuel suppliers reduces DEP's exposure to possible disruptions from any single source of supply. DEP also mitigates the impact of market volatility on the portfolio of supply contracts by using a mixture of pricing mechanisms. DEP's portfolio of diversified contract pricing yielded an average unit cost of $50.44 per pound for uranium concentrates during the review period, representing an increase of approximately 21.1% per pound from the prior review period. The average unit cost of DEP's purchases of enrichment services during the review period increased 23.8% to $94.99 per separative work unit. Delivered costs for fabrication and conversion services have a limited impact on the overall fuel rate, expense rate, given that the dollar amounts for these purchases represents a substantially smaller percentage, 21.1 and 6.5% respectively, for fuel batches recently loaded into DEP's reactors. Of the DEP's total direct fuel costs relative to uranium concentrates or enrichment, which are 41.4% and 31% respectively. The average fuel expense is expected to remain relatively flat from 0.6270 cents per kilowatt hour incurred in the review period to approximately 0.6157 cents per kilowatt hour in the billing period. Although costs of certain components of nuclear fuel are expected to increase in future years, particularly in light of geopolitical events, nuclear fuel costs on a cents per kilowatt hour basis will likely continue to be a fraction of the cents per kilowatt hour cost of fossil fuel. Therefore, customers will continue to benefit from DEP's diverse generation mix and the strong performance of its nuclear fleet through lower fuel costs than would otherwise result absent the significant contribution of nuclear generation to meeting customers' demand. This concludes my testimony summary.
Thank you, Mr. Houston. Chair Belzer, Mr. Simrel and Mr. Houston are now available to answer any questions from council or the commission.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Nucor Steel,
No questions, Madam Chair.
Office of Regulatory Staff,
No questions from us, thank you.
thank you. Commissioners, questions for this panel? Commissioner Thomas?
Thank you and good morning. I think, Mr. Houston, my question is for you. So you're talking about the sourcing, and you indicate that you source fabrication services to a single domestic supplier on a plant-by-plant basis. And so basically, I'm just wondering, is there a backup plan or contingency plan if somebody doesn't come through?
We have an RFP where we will solicit from, depending on which reactors we're looking to source for, from up to primarily 3 particular fabrication vendors within the U.S. And at any particular time, we will select based on our needs and what their product has for meeting our needs. We'll select one. During that period of time, if we're constantly monitoring their progress through surveillance of their facilities and keeping track of those, we also maintain a unique source of engineering services in-house. So we do what we call self-perform of a lot of our licensing work. And the licensing work is primarily the biggest challenge and hurdle with respect to switching a fuel vendor, because any vendor and any fuel product and the methods that we analyze the reactors have to be approved by the NRC. So we maintain a competent staff that's able to help us nimbly switch should the need arise.
Mr. Houston, could you adjust that microphone up a little bit? Just the top part, if you, thank you very much.
Okay.
All right, thank you. And so, Mr. Simrel, you talked about revisions to the industry's material reliability program guidance for the U.S. pressurized water reactors. And can you just talk a little bit generally about the nature of the revisions?
Yes, sir, Commissioner Thomas. So this stems back to the indications that we found at the Robinson Nuclear Plant in the fall of 2022. And what we found on the core barrel was industry precedent setting, and with the linear indications that were found. So we've been partnering with the Electric Power Research Institute at EPRI and ASME, the American Society of Mechanical Engineers. And we've got additional activities planned for this fall outage on Robinson to better understand the cause to help Robinson going forward. But based on what was found at Robinson, it's never been seen in the nuclear industry before. So with EPRI and ASME, we're putting in new inspection requirements for all of the pressurized water reactors in the United States. Essentially, what it is, it's on the core barrel, and the core barrel is a device. At Robinson, it's approximately 25.5 feet tall, approximately 11 feet diameter, and 4 inches thick. But it sits in the core, and the cooler water comes in, hits the core barrel, flows down, and then the water flows up through the reactor core bundles, which is how it's heated. Heats the water to make steam, ultimately. But so each of the sites will have to unload their cores during their refueling outages and do inspections of the inside of the core barrel at the different well locations. For Robinson, where we found the challenge, so this core barrel being 25.5 feet tall, it's 3 sections that are welded together. And up at the upper girth weld, at one of the toe of the weld, is where we found the 5 linear indications around the circumference of the core barrel. So each pressurized water reactor will have to perform a similar type inspection, given what was found at Robinson, to see if there's any other indications of linear indications developing at these plants across the United States.
All right, thank you. I appreciate it. That's all I had at this time.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Caston?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I tried to follow that core in the inspection part. You said it was 25 feet high. Was that right?
25.6 feet tall.
Plus or minus 0.6 feet. Diameter was 11.
And the inside diameter is 11 feet.
ID 11 feet and 4 inch.
4 inches thick.
And you say that's in 3 sections?
They're welded together to make that component. There's 3 like barrels that are stacked that are welded together, and combined they're 25.6 feet tall.
Okay. And you said that's what happened with that at Robinson has not occurred anywhere in the industry that anyone's aware of.
It has not been seen in a pressurized water reactor.
So I was trying to follow how you said, those, I guess, at other refuelings or shutdowns or whatever you do, need to be inspected. And I was trying to follow how it was inspected, but I was thinking something that big, 4 inches thick, is there a way to lift that? I mean, do you have some hoist or bridge crane, or how do you inspect that again?
Yeah, I'll explain that. So, sorry, Mr. Caston. It can be lifted out of the reactor vessel. We can perform the inspection while it's still in the actual reactor vessel itself. It's all underwater. It's obviously high dose rates, so it's all done robotically with submersibles. And what we believe is due to flow-induced vibrations, that's most likely the cause of these linear indications. But the inspections will be performed by robotic submersibles and cameras. What we had to do at Robinson, once we found signs of a linear indication, we went there with special cleaning equipment that were put on the robotics. We were able to better clean, almost like a pressure wash of the core barrel, and that's where we were able to identify. The first indication we found was approximately 12 inches long. And then we went ahead and cleaned the entire circumference of that upper girth weld, and we found 4 more indications. So for the industry, it'll all be performed via robotic submersibles, because a human cannot, it always has to be underwater because of the dose rates. And that's really some of the complications in resolving the issue. In the documents where it took us, the outage extension was 11 days. We were working through how to go in and assess and mitigate the indications that were found. So it's all done remotely with cameras and robotics, the cleaning and inspections.
And does every utility do a similar inspection?
Yes.
To those?
It's a 10-year required inspection, and the last inspection performed at Robinson was in 2012. And then when we did the inspection in the fall of 2022, that's when we found these indications. All the other pressurized water reactors in the United States, they'll perform a similar type 10-year inspection. But given what was recently found at Robinson, and it's never been seen before, now each utility is having to look at, do those inspections early, just to make sure that not having something similar that needs to be assessed and particularly evaluated and addressed.
And do they do the similar kind of inspection as far as underwater pressure washing or whatever you said to see it?
We use a contract company to do that work for us, so obviously they do that similar type work across the industry.
One final question. You mentioned flow-induced vibration. Is like some mass of water and some kind of frequency?
This is what we believe is it's due to flow-induced vibration. You know, there's several 100,000 gallons a minute of flow that flow through
Per minute?
per minute that flow through the reactor vessels. So there's a lot of flow that flows into the reactor vessel, down the wall of the core barrel, and then up through the fuel, which again, where it's heated. That's a couple 100,000 gallons a minute. So there's a lot of flow, and we believe that the flow and the vibrations is most likely what's causing it. But for this fall on Robinson, we're contracting with several different companies to come in, and we've got several plans this outage to try to better understand the cause. We're going to try to take a sample. Our intention is to take a sample of some of the material to be able to get it to a lab to be able to analyze the cause of the linear indications. And again, all that will be done underwater with robotics.
And all of those locations where you observed that was at prior wells or welded joints, in essence?
Yes, I guess if my water bottle was the core barrel, the upper third, the upper girth weld runs about where this paper wrapping is, and the linear indications right at the toe of the upper part of the weld, like the heat affected zone around, we found 5 linear indications around that circumference.
And I guess what I think I heard you say is you're bringing in a bunch of smart people to do the forensic analysis. Like, what do we think happened? You know, whether it's this flow-induced vibrations or whatever. That's what's occurring.
It is. We'll bring in resources and subject matter experts to help analyze, be able to take a sample. And again, we're partnering with EPRI and ASME, using their expertise to help try to determine what the cause is so we can mitigate it. Because we expect to be able to operate Robinson for many more years, applying for subsequent license renewal. So ultimately, we expect to be able to operate Robinson out to the year 2050. So we want to make sure that we understand the cause, be able to mitigate it, to be able to operate for many more years.
I think this is my final question, but does, like, the NRC or I would think NRC, the government in general, would have a keen interest in getting this answer also. Are they involved other than saying, hey, y'all figure this out?
They're involved, and part of our, during the last Robinson refueling outage, part of that extension time, we had to put together a mitigation plan to be able to operate for another 24 months to this fall, so when we could do additional sampling and evaluation. So everything we did from an evaluation standpoint to provide that justification, we were obviously providing to them, because they were involved in our our approval to restart, that we were going to restart the Robinson reactor. So they have been engaged, and we've been keeping them informed relative. There's 2 Nuclear Regulatory Commission residents that are always on site at Robinson, as it is with all of our plants. So we keep them informed with the activities that we're performing.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Not sure how much it had to do with all of this, but I found it fascinating, and the bottle helped me a lot too. So thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Thomas, do you have more?
I do. I have a follow-up question. So, is any repair work been done, or is it started, or you have to wait until the next shutdown, or what's anticipated? Or
so what we did. So yes, we did do some mitigative work during the last refueling outage. Out of the 5 linear indications that were found around the core barrel, 4 we were able to evaluate and accept to operate for an additional 24 months. There was a 5th indication that was longer. It was 17.76 inches long, that we end up using the contract company that we did, and robotics. We went in and drilled 1.5-inch holes at the end of those indications to stop the growth of the indication. So that's the work that we've performed is to stop that indication growth. So that's all that we've performed to date. Obviously, Robinson right now is operating very well at 100% power, and we expect it to operate until this fall when we'll shut down for refueling outage. And at that time, we'll shut the unit down. We'll take the reactor vessel head off of the reactor vessel. We'll remove all the fuel, and then that will allow us to access the core barrel again to be able to get to the inside of this weld. And we're going to, right now, our plans is to take, working with different companies to be able to, it's called like a boat sample, but it's a scoop of some of that metal such that we can analyze what's going on. So that we'll do more assessment and evaluation this fall. That's what's been performed to date, Commissioner Thomas.
All right, appreciate that explanation. Thank you.
Commissioner Carolyn Williams.
Thank you, Chair Belzer. Good morning.
Morning.
I would like to go back to the bottle analogy and to the linear indications. Remind me what, and you can choose to use the bottle or not, but that was a good example. But just remind me what we're up against in terms of what the linear indications might do. What's the risk associated with them? What are linear indications?
So it's essentially a crack in the metal.
Okay.
And the metal's 4 inches thick. And the 5 indications that we found, the depth of the indications, the depth of the crack, range from 37% to 92%. There's plenty of metal. The diameter is 11 feet. So there's plenty of metal from a structural integrity standpoint. As far as what we're looking at this fall, there's a number of methods that we can stop these growth indications by drilling the holes at the end. There's ways that we can go in and we can put like a metal clamp and clamp it together so it can't grow. But in the end, our objective is to take actions to ensure that no more indications, but also for the 5 that we've identified, that we'll mitigate them so they can't grow anymore, to be able to operate with no further issues for the long term.
And one of them, did you indicate, was almost 90-something% in penetration?
92%.
Do you have to treat that one differently?
We analyze all of them. The one that gave us the greatest concern was the one that was based on it being 17.7 inches long, and the depth is why we had to take the action and drill the holes. But each one is analyzed individually, and then we assess it for any actions that we have to take. And when we shut down the Robinson plant this fall, we'll go back and relook at obviously the one that we drilled the holes in the end and the other 4, and see if there was any growth change over the last 2 years, and that'll help inform the actions we need to take in the future. But we expect to be able to mitigate these indications such that we can operate Robinson for what we intend to for subsequent license renewal.
Thank you very much. No further questions.
Vice Chair Powers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Houston, they're leaving you out. And they got you sitting next to that bottle there, and I don't know whether it's got nuclear fuel in it or what it's got in it.
Just water, Mr. Commissioner.
You testified in your direct testimony that that DEP uses a single domestic supplier on I think you said plant-by-plant basis when you have contracts about repairs and different things, fabrication services. What's the contingency plan if that group you're working with falls through, disbands, bankrupt, or whatever? Do you have a contingency plan for that, and how do you do that?
Yes, Mr. Commissioner. So almost all of our reactors have multiple suppliers and vendors for fabrication services that are able to supply it. So for almost all of them, there is another supplier. Just that in any one particular time for fabrication services, we will elect to just choose one. And in that way, we don't have to mix what we call mix a reactor core of the fuel assemblies. Now, I was speaking specifically in that case to the fabricators, and what the fabricators do. They're the vendors that fabricate the metal cages.
Yeah.
So we'll supply the other upstream components of nuclear fuel to the fabricators, and that's where the engineered product actually comes from. And so we prefer not to mix cores, what we call have multiple fabricators fuel in there routinely. We'll have to, if we ever switch fabricators, we'll have to do that for some period of time. But ultimately, in more recent times, our goal has been to have one core that has all fuel from one fabricator. Now, there will always be then another fabricator that's available. We just would not have contracted with them for a particular period of time. So that's what I was getting at with respect to that. But the key challenge, one of the biggest challenges with switching is making sure that we have the licensing basis. So for each fabricator or each fuel product design that we insert in the core, there has to be an NRC approved design and an NRC approved licensing basis to be able to do that. And that was what I was speaking to Commissioners Thomas's initial question about having an internal group of folks that do self-perform is one of the things that is unique about Duke Energy compared to many of our peers, is that we can more nimbly do that on those evaluations ourselves to be able to switch with minimal impact on operations.
Okay. The only thing wrong with that answer is you started with almost all.
So there is one reactor design that we have that does not have currently right now a backup supplier, but we monitor that vendor from a financial perspective. Before and always, as we keep going, we will have a financial review from their economic status. That particular facility also makes fuel for our other reactors throughout their nuclear fleet. So we're constantly monitoring the status of that reactor vendor.
Okay, and if something happened to that vendor, what would you do? You said there's such a process. Obviously, it would take time to make the change, and
it would take time for another vendor to be able to come up with a design and go through all of those requirements, if you will, from a licensing perspective, to be able to supply for that. But that has been the case for that reactor since the late 70s, as long as it's been operating.
Well, it just seems like these days if something can go wrong, it will. But thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, sir.
Commissioner Carly Williams.
Thank you, Chair Belzer. Just following up on that line of questions, is there a report associated with the line indicators and in terms of what you found that we've already got on file? Mr. Simrell?
When you said line, you talking about the indications that were found on the core
Right.
barrel? I don't know what's been provided. I don't think we've provided a report of the actual core barrel indications.
Is that something that could be provided?
I'll take that as a follow-up to
Okay.
see what we could provide.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Commissioner Williams, I'm not sure if this is helpful to your question, but those reports are provided to the Office of Regulatory Staff through discovery. They are marked as confidential, of course, but we do provide them through the course of discovery. They are not on file with the Commission.
Could we request that that be a confidential exhibit in this particular hearing? Or what would the answer be if I asked that?
So we typically have not provided those just because they provide so much detail that could pose a security risk to the nuclear power plants. But if the Commission requests it, we would of course file it as a confidential exhibit.
This issue is not finalized. Is that correct, Mr. Simrell?
That's correct.
I mean, this is preliminary, is it not?
It is, and as I stated, for this fall, when we have the opportunity to perform a follow-up inspection, that'll help inform the actions that we need to continue to take going forward.
And you mentioned the NRC resident inspectors. They're fully aware of
Yes, ma'am.
these issues, is that correct?
That is correct.
And has the NRC indicated that the plant cannot continue to operate?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Is the NRC approved or acquiesced with the plan going forward to look at this in the fall?
They're fully aware of what we plan to perform this fall, and we will keep them educated based on what we find and our analysis that we perform based on what we find again this fall.
But at this point, there is no final report on the issue.
No, ma'am.
Okay. Can y'all provide further information after the NRC issues its report?
Of course, Chair.
Does the NRC issue a public version versus a confidential version of any reports?
I think I'd have to have Mr. Simrell answer that.
Do you know?
I don't believe the NRC will issue any type of report unless they have a concern. We will perform our own analysis. We'll certainly share that with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission.
Well, if there's an issue that comes up at, say, Robinson, and you said it's the first time that this has been seen in, a pressurized water reactor?
Yes, ma'am.
Has this issue been seen in other type of reactors, do you know?
It has been seen in some of the boiling water reactors relative to the vessel, but not in the pressurized water reactor.
Okay.
So
it's not an unusual event. It just hasn't been seen in this type of reactor.
That is correct.
Okay. And when the NRC issues a report with regard to, say, an issue such as this with a final report, do they make that available to all other operators of similar reactors so that they can be on the lookout for similar issues?
I would think they would. I mean,
Well, y'all get, if there's an issue that arises, I'm just going to throw out Vogel. I don't know what kind of reactor that is, but it's in the news these days.
pressurized water
And
reactor.
if they find a flag an issue over there, y'all don't get word about that to be on the lookout potentially or do an inspection?
We do. We typically get the information through EPRI or INPO, the Institute of Nuclear Power Operations, where all the nuclear plants share information through operating experience. So we would get the information. It's not, some of the information is shared through the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, but it's also shared through other avenue streams as well.
But I mean, y'all, it's kind of industry custom to let other operators know of issues that have arisen to be on the lookout for warnings or similar things, right?
It is, and we've been partnering with EPRI and communicating through different, I'll say, working groups across the industry. There's a lot of folks interested to see what we see again this fall on Robinson. But yeah, the nuclear industry is very keen and very openly shares information and operating experience such that we all learn from each other.
Okay, thank you very much.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Caston?
just not trying to beat that dead horse to death, but having heard the questions and the responses and all, you know, I certainly believe that the company and you gentlemen understand this, have this, and know what you're doing. And I certainly understand the concern relative to any security issues and such. And to be honest, I suspect all the information would be very voluminous, and I don't really want to read all that. I guess my main interest or concern, and I can't speak for the other commissioners, but I suspect it's similar, is that you guys are on top of it, doing stuff you need to do, and you'll keep ORS or whomever informed, and world will keep turning and the sun will continue to come up. Is that a fair generalized statement?
Yeah, that is correct. And, you know, relative to what, you know, Duke has previously committed to from a DEC perspective, from a DEP, we've been proactively sharing all of our outage reports and information with the ORS. We will continue to do that. So when we complete the the Robinson outage this fall, all the information that comes from the outage relative to the outage performance, what we find with the core barrel will be shared with the ORS.
And I also have an assumption that NRC probably has great interest in all of these kind of things, you know, cracks and tie rods and everything else. And they'll probably stay on top of this also. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Gentlemen, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Anything further? Mr. Summerall, I had a follow-up too. With regard to the Brunswick February outage, you indicated that it was due to a reactor recirculation pump seal leakage trend. What does that mean?
We had the refueling outage scheduled for February 16th. And at Brunswick being a boiling water reactor, we have two reactor recirc pumps. And for one of the pumps, the seals, you know, the pumps have seals, but one of the pumps had seal leakage that was trending at an elevated rate, and it was trending up. And basically,
when you say trending, you mean the leak was getting worse?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
I need simple language. I'm sorry. I know there's a industry usage, but I grew up in Clarendon County. I need little words.
I understand. But the leakage rate was rising, and we made a decision to take the unit offline just to ensure we didn't have any challenges that could jeopardize the operation of the unit. It was a conservative decision. We started the refueling outage early. We replaced the seals on both the reactor recirc pumps for Brunswick Unit 1, and it's operating very well today at 100% power.
Was that, did that lend to some efficiency of making repairs and doing the refueling outage by starting a few days early?
It did challenge us from getting all the needed resources on site 5 days early. But we work with our fleet shared resources and our vendor partners, and you know, everyone rallied to help us. We were able to complete all of our scheduled work that we had planned on Brunswick Unit 1.
Within the time frame that had been expected. I think you said it was like 32 days.
It was 32 days allocation. We completed the outage in 31.3 days, and we completed all the work that we intended to perform.
Including the repairs, the refueling and the repairs.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, anything further for these witnesses?
Madam
Commissioner
Chair,
Justin Williams.
just have one question. Thank you, gentlemen, for your testimony. It's clear and it makes sense to me, as I'm sure it does to the rest of my colleagues. My question is more so related to if there was an issue that caused some level of concern, what is the process to address, I don't know what the term of art is, but I would describe it as a critical event at one of the facilities, a problem that could cause some level of environmental harm or damage human health and safety. If something were to occur, is there a checklist or action items? Like how would that make it from your facility through the necessary authorities?
Saying if we had let's say we had an operational event at one of our plants.
Right.
We have procedural guidance that our operators and our plant personnel perform. Part of those procedures, we notify the states and counties in the communities near the plants that we've had there's different thresholds of what the challenge could lead to or would be. And that's communicated to the states and counties. And like, there's sirens in the area that depending on what the event was, the sirens could be sounded to alert, hey, listen to the TV, the radio, check your iPhone for any type of text. But it's proceduralized in all of our communications to the states and counties, and then also to the media. And then we run drills. Each of our plants perform drills. One of our plants has a drill tomorrow where we work. We run a fake casualty on a plant. We have it on the simulator, and we perform that. We communicate with the states and counties, give them an opportunity to participate in the drills. Then every 2 years we do a graded annual exercise with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the states, counties, FEMA, and I would tell you that our operators, out of every 10 weeks, our operators attend 2 weeks of training. Part of that training is on a simulator, which is a full-scale mock-up of our control rooms. And we put them through various scenarios, some type of casualties for the plant. So our operators are very well trained and get trained 2 weeks out of every 10, such that we're able to manage any type of event that would happen at the plant. And I also go on to say we spend, I'm very, very proud that we spend a lot of time and effort and money to maintain the plants and to upgrade the plants, which ultimately, will supports the subsequent license renewal as well. But all of our communications outward are proceduralized, and we're trained on those procedures.
Thank you for that, sir. And I would assume so. Not that I have personal knowledge, but I would just, if I think about all the things that could happen, I would imagine that someone has already thought about them a long time before me and their procedures in place. Considering that, and considering why we're here, that process, the procedures that are in place, that's not really, the PSC is not really a part of that in terms of the notification process. Or is it?
Well, fortunately,
and there's no right or wrong answer here. I'm just.
Well, fortunately, we don't have any events, haven't had any events to talk about, and depending, it would show up in our reports if we had a forced outage or a maintenance outage. If we had some type of event, we had to take a reactor offline, that would show up in the reports. We'd have to explain the what and the why, what happened. So it would be communicated through those means that we normally communicate with, and obviously, I would expect that we would notify the ORS as well if we had some type of challenge at any of our plants. That's something I'll follow up relative to the process to notify our ORS. But
no, I'm not asking you to do extra work. Well, I want to get it done here. That's fine. And so when you say it will be in your report or it will be reported, that would be something that we would do during a hearing like this, right?
Yes, sir. Like in the report we have here, we had to take the Brunswick Unit 1 plant offline in April 2023, and then the Robinson plant offline in June of 2023. Now, we didn't have any type of event at the plant. There was something, equipment issue that we dealt with, but it would be similar to that showing up in the report that we had to bring the unit offline. Here's the what and the why, what happened.
And just reading both of you all's body language, you seem to be fairly confident in all the procedures in place, and the commission really should have no concerns about the operation of the facilities you manage. That's what I'm reading from.
Yeah, I'll just share from my perspective, Commissioner Williams. I lay my head down at night, every night, a mile away from the Catawba Nuclear Station as a crow flies. So I live within a mile of the plant where I worked for many years, and I was a licensed operator. I've been through all the training. I have a lot of confidence in our training department, how we maintain all of our plants. So I'm very confident. We're not overconfident, but we're confident in how we maintain our plants. We train our people to be able to operate our plants as we all expect.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Houston, you're welcome to provide any comment if you have them.
Mr. Simmerl is our operational expert, but I do second his notion.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioners. Anything further? Ms. Brown, any redirect?
No redirect.
Thank you. Gentlemen, thank you for your testimony this morning, your appearance here. We appreciate it, and you may stand down. Ms. Brown or Mr. Trawick?
The company would next call Mr. Jim McClay and Jeff Flanagan as a panel. Do you have your name placard, Jim?
All right, sirs, raise your right hand, please. Do you swear affirm the testimony you're about to give to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Mr. McClay, would you please state your name for the record?
Jim McClay.
By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm the Managing Director of Natural Gas Trading at Duke Energy Carolinas Corporation.
How long have you worked in the energy industry?
26 years.
Please describe any prior roles you've held that are relevant to your testimony in this proceeding.
Since joining Progress Energy as an energy trader in 1998, I've worked in various power trading, natural gas procurement functions, leadership roles, including Director of Power Trading, Portfolio Management, and Manager of Gas and Oil Trading. Following the merger between Duke Energy and Progress Energy, I was named Manager of Gas and Oil Trading for Duke Energy. In May 2019, I was promoted to Director of Trading, and August of 2021, I assumed my current position as Managing Director of Natural Gas Trading.
Please describe your responsibilities at the company.
As Managing Director of Natural Gas Trading, I participate in all aspects of the overall strategic direction and commercial management of purchase and delivery and storage of natural gas for Duke Energy. This includes monitoring and providing guidance in various areas of fuel markets, including feedback regarding supply and demand, price availability, economics, and deliverability of existing and future supply sources. I also supervise the company's physical and natural gas procurement and associated transportation activity, including the negotiation and administration of long-term, short-term purchase contracts, as well as the company's associated financial hedging programs. In addition to natural gas, I supervise procurement of fuel oil, optimization of emission allowances, and the power trading and hedging functions of Duke Energy's Midwest utilities.
Thank you, Mr. McClay. Chair Belzer, given Mr. McClay's experience in fuel trading, procurement, and hedging programs, I move to qualify Mr. McClay as an expert in the fields of gas and oil trading and fuel hedging.
Any questions of voir dire regarding the witness's qualifications? Hearing none, the Commission will accept Mr. McClay as an expert in the field of gas and oil trading and fuel hedging.
Thank you, Chair Belzer. Mr. McClay, did you prepare or cause to be prepared 12 pages of direct testimony that were pre-filed with the Commission in this proceeding?
I did.
If I asked you the same questions that were asked in your pre-filed direct testimony today, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Chair Belzer, I would ask that Mr. McClay's pre-filed direct testimony be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. McClay's pre-filed direct testimony will be entered into the record as if given from the stand.
Mr. McClay, did you also prepare or cause to be prepared 2 exhibits that were attached to your pre-filed direct testimony?
Yes.
Do you have any changes to those exhibits at this time?
No, I don't.
I would ask that Mr. McClay's 2 pre-filed exhibits be entered as the next composite hearing exhibit.
Mr. McClay's exhibits that accompanied his pre-filed testimony and marked as McClay Exhibit 1 and McClay Exhibit 2 will be a composite exhibit marked for identification as Hearing Exhibit 4 and admitted into the evidence of this case.
Thank you. Mr. McClay, would you please provide a summary of your direct testimony at this time?
Yes. The purpose of my testimony is to describe DEP's fossil fuel purchasing practices, provide actual fossil fuel costs for the review period versus the prior review period, and describe changes forthcoming for the billing period. DEP's average delivered cost of coal for the review period was $117.26 per ton, compared to $92.63 per ton in the prior review period, representing an increase of approximately 27%. The cost of delivered coal includes an average transportation cost of $35.21 per ton in the review period, compared to $32.83 per ton in the prior review period, representing an increase of approximately 7%. DEP's average price of gas purchased for the review period was $5.39 per MMBTU as compared to $8.04 per MMBTU in the prior review period, representing a decrease of 33%. The cost of gas is inclusive of gas supply, transportation, storage, and financial hedging. DEP's coal burn for the review period was 2.7 million tons compared to coal burn of 2.3 million tons in the prior review period, representing an increase of 15%. DEP's natural gas burn for the review period was 166.8 million MMBTU compared to a gas burn of 184.8 million MMBTU in the prior review period, representing a decrease of 10%. Changes in coal and natural gas burns were primarily driven by the relationship of coal commodity prices during 2023 relative to natural gas prices in the same period, as rapidly declining coal commodity prices used for the commitment and dispatch of the company's coal generation units became more competitive with natural gas costs, increasing gas to coal generation fuel switching between the company's combustion turbines and its coal generation units. Coal markets continue to experience a high degree of volatility for a variety of reasons. Over the course of 2023 the beginning of 2024, published coal market curves declined from the historically high levels of 2022 as a consequence of low natural gas prices and overall lack of coal generation demand. However, despite decline in published coal market prices, the impacts of rising production costs on individual mining operations may result in higher coal contract prices than market publications imply. In 2023, the company saw improvement in deliveries by its rail transportation providers following the delivery constraints experienced in 2022. In 2023, natural gas market dynamics were primarily influenced by increasing production and growth in inventory storage, which caused prices to sharply decline. Over the longer-term planning horizon, natural gas supply has the ability to respond to growing demand related to power generation, liquefied natural gas exports, and pipeline exports to Mexico. However, it is increasingly uncertain whether the pipeline infrastructure needed to supply power generation will be available. As I explained in my testimony, DEP transitioned to dynamic dispatch and implemented the optimized coal input price process effective May 15, 2023. The enhanced dynamic dispatch process reflects coal market supply chain dynamics and forecasted fuel prices. Dynamic dispatch generates an optimized fuel price for the unit commitment and dispatch that minimizes system costs over the near-term fuel planning horizon while integrating the forward-looking forecasted coal delivery plan and inventory balances into the current coal fuel price process for updating weekly prices for unit commitment and dispatch. DEP's projections for the billing period include approximately 3.3 million tons of coal and 177.2 million MMBTU of natural gas consumed. These projections are subject to change due to multiple factors, including but not limited to exposure to market prices, the amount of Central App coal DEP is able to purchase and deliver, and the non-Central Appalachian coal DEP is able to consume, changes in transportation rates, performance of contract deliveries by suppliers and railroads, and potential additional costs associated with suppliers' compliance with legal and statutory changes, and changes in actual delivered fuel costs and weather-driven demand. This concludes my testimony summary.
Thank you, Mr. McClay. Good morning, Mr. Flanagan. Would you please state your name for the record?
Jeff Flanagan.
By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm employed by Duke Energy Business Services, LLC, as the General Manager of Carolina's Dispatchable Generation West Zone, including the Marshall Steam Station, Allen Steam Station, Asheville Combined Cycle, and W.S. Lee Station.
How long have you worked in the fossil hydro solar industry?
Approximately 22 years.
What is your educational background?
I graduated from North Carolina State University with a Bachelor of Science degree in Paper Science and Engineering and a Bachelor of Science degree in Chemistry. I hold a Master in Business Administration from the University of South Carolina, and I'm a registered professional engineer in the state of South Carolina.
Please describe any prior roles you have held that are relevant to your testimony in this proceeding.
I began my career with Duke Energy as a flue gas desulfurization scrubber engineer at Progress Energy Carolinas. Since then, I've held various roles of increasing responsibility in generation projects, engineering, and operations areas. This includes my role as Operations and Maintenance Superintendent at Marshall Station, the station manager at Smith Energy Complex, and the general manager of Marshall and Allen stations before assuming my current role.
Please describe your current responsibilities at the company.
I'm responsible for the overall direction and management of over 4,000 megawatts of Carolina's dispatchable generation, coal, combined cycle, and peaking generation. I provide strategic direction and leadership to station general managers, including day-to-day operations, business analysis, process development, O&M and capital budget allocation, and implementation and outage performance. I'm also responsible for the operational excellence at all levels of the organization, including continuous improvement and competitive benchmarking.
How long have you been in your current role?
Since February of 2023.
Thank you, Mr. Flanagan. Chair Balzer, given Mr. Flanagan's extensive experience, I move to qualify him as an expert in the field of non-nuclear power plant operations.
Any questions or voir dire regarding this witness's qualifications? Hearing none, the commission will accept Mr. Flanagan as an expert in the field of non-nuclear power plant operations.
Thank you. Mr. Flanagan, did you prepare or cause to be prepared 10 pages of direct testimony that were pre-filed with the commission in this proceeding?
I did.
If I asked you the same questions that were asked in your pre-filed direct testimony today, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
I would ask that Mr. Flanagan's pre-filed direct testimony be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Flanagan's pre-filed direct testimony will be entered into the record as if given from the stand.
Thank you, Chair Balzer. Mr. Flanagan, would you please provide a summary of your direct testimony at this time?
Yes. The purpose of my testimony is to describe DEP's non-nuclear generation portfolio and changes made since the 2023 fuel cost recovery proceeding. Discuss the performance of DEP's non-nuclear generating facilities during the review period of March 1st, 2023 through February 29, 2024. Provide information on significant outages that occurred during the review period and discuss the company's environmental compliance efforts. Our primary objective is to provide safe, reliable, and cost-effective electricity to DEP customers. The company's portfolio includes a diverse mix of units that, along with nuclear capacity, allows DEP to meet the dynamics of customer load requirements in a logical and cost-effective manner. The company's generation portfolio consists of approximately 8,974 megawatts of generation and storage capacity, which includes 3,143 megawatts of coal-fired generation, 2,432 megawatts of combined cycle generation, and 3,079 megawatts of combined cycle turbine generation, 228 megawatts of hydroelectric generation, 86 megawatts of solar, and 6 megawatts of battery storage. Since last year's fuel proceeding, the Smith Energy Complex simple cycle units underwent advanced gas path peaker upgrades and maintenance, resulting in a 28 megawatt increase to capacity. The company complies with all applicable environmental regulations and maintains station equipment and systems in a cost-effective manner to ensure reliability for customers. The company also acts in a timely manner to implement work plans and projects that enhance the safety and performance of systems, equipment, and personnel, consistent with providing low-cost power options for DEP customers. Equipment inspection and maintenance outages are generally scheduled during the spring and fall months when customer demand is reduced due to milder temperatures. The company's non-nuclear generating units operated efficiently and reliably during the review period. Most units had at least one short planned outage during the review period to inspect and maintain plant equipment. During the review period, the company's system generation was approximately 61 million megawatt hours. The non-nuclear fleet provided 29.8 million megawatt hours, or approximately 49% of total generation. As a percentage of the total system generation, 10% was produced from coal fuel-fired stations, approximately 35% from combined cycle operations, 2% from CTs, 1% from hydro facilities, and 0.4% from solar. This concludes my testimony summary.
Thank you, Mr. Flanagan. Chair Balzer, Mr. McClay and Mr. Flanagan are now available to answer any questions from council or the commission.
Thank you. Nucor, questions? Office of Regulatory Staff?
No questions, Madam Chair.
Commissioners, Vice Chair Powers?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And good morning, gentlemen. Mr. McClay, just to kind of simplify where I can understand it, there's been an increase in coal and a decrease in gas is pretty much what you said.
Referring to the burns? Yes.
And this fuel switching, it just sounds like to me it's all based on dollars and not any real environmental consideration to it. Can you explain that or expand a little bit on this?
It is based on least cost dispatch, and in that dispatch, emissions are considered in the economics. So I think from that respect, it does include emissions.
Okay. Can you give us an update on how this transition that you're doing to, you call it dynamic dispatch implementation, how it's working, and maybe an example of how it's maintained least cost economics?
Sure.
Within the consideration of the environment?
Okay. Yeah. Well, so the dynamic dispatch, refresh everybody, is just an adjustment to the coal price prior to entering into the economic dispatch model, the production model. And really what that's doing is it's ensuring that, you're not getting wild swings in terms of burns versus the inventory. So it's looking at supply, deliveries, costs over a 17 to 18 month period. And it's solving economically for least cost. So if it needs to put an adjustment to the coal price, either up or down, to maintain that steady, reliable, burn, so it doesn't go to either end and go, so you're not accumulating on either end of those bookends of your inventory levels. So it's a safety on one side and reliability on the other side. So we do that so that you're not forced all of a sudden if gas goes to, let's just say, $10 and coal is in the money, you would run through all of your coal pretty fast and may not be able to resupply it fast enough. So that's the whole idea, is to keep it so that it's in those bookends, in bounds, so that you're not going to make any kind of uneconomic decision. Or on the other side of that, if gas drops to $1.50 and no coal, or a lot of the coal is not dispatched, then you don't get to the point where you're at an unsafe level of coal inventory on the pile. So it sort of keeps you within those bounds. It makes those, and it's economic, and so you're not forced to do anything like stop a train or sell coal, because then you might be doing that uneconomically. This is more economic.
Is there any real problems or expense to storage of coal?
So there's on-site storage, and then we have some off-site storage at KRT. But if you add the actual delivered prices, they're about the same. I mean, you do have to pay for storage, but because we manage it rather than two separate entities, we manage it as one face to the market. We get a lot of synergies that we're saving the customers money, so we can, rather than having two separate coal piles or trains that are going only contracted with DEP or DEC, we can manage them together and get a lot of flexibility and synergy. So although there are costs, we are saving money.
Okay. The modeling that you do, it's called FAST, the model outputs. And is this different than what you were doing from 20 to 23? Is it different than what you're doing now?
Yeah, it actually is. So it gives us more visibility into the probabilistic burns. So really, we had a deterministic model that would give you a coal burn, and using FAST, we use this for gas and coal reagents. It gives you more of a range, so that you can make decisions and be aware of, the potential guardrails as well. So it's helped us a lot. So, when we're procuring gas or coal, for coal, we might target the mean. For gas, like in the wintertime, we might target the 90th percentile because we could have higher gas burns. So it does help in managing our procurement.
So you think the forecasting that you can do now is better than what you could do before?
I think the forecasting has a lot of changes over time that we've been able to, I should say improvements, because the forecast, was adequate. But I would say we've put a lot of extra time into doing vendor reviews with our data. We're doing peer neighbor comparisons with our neighbors like Southern Company and neighboring utilities that would help us out. So we are constantly trying to improve that, as well as updating the models for weather and some of our approaches that we use. So yes, it has come quite a long way.
Do you think, can you say to what degree they're accurate now, or some sort of number on that?
I don't have that information, what the actual metric improvement is. But it does give us, I will say, more awareness and in our day-to-day, as well as, in our forecasting periods.
You think this model will improve with time or become more accurate over time?
I think it still has, still have a few things that we're working on to get more accurate data. Yes, I do.
And you're very confident about that?
I am not the expert, but from what I've been told and what they're looking at, makes a lot of sense.
Well, I mean, I've heard the word confident a couple of times this morning. You know who else was confident? The captain of the Titanic.
Yes, at the bottom of the ocean, every ship, there's a chart. I get it.
All right. And these purchases, you're concerned with the cost. You're not dealing with the environmental practices of it.
I think the company overall is working to transition into the future, but I think for the time being, we're buying what we need for our generation reliably and cost competitively. So, if there's a way of somehow changing that, I don't think we're changing our procurement yet to reflect anything different.
Okay. Well, makes a lot of sense. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Commissioner Justin Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. McClay, good to see you again. Have a couple questions for you. No offense, sir. How would you define a economic decision?
An economic decision takes into account a cost, an actual fuel, let's just say a dispatch cost, versus something else, an alternative that would be less expensive, but maintain the same reliability.
And so in the current model, do you know how cost is weighed compared to other criteria?
Yeah, so in the model, it's more complicated than, it's above my pay grade here, but the model does take into account other factors other than just, obviously cost, but it's also like a security constrained. So if there's a problem with a unit that's, let's just say, derated or things like that, it will take that into account as well.
Would you describe the model as artificial intelligence?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay. Do you see a role in artificial intelligence now or in the future?
That's a great question. I don't know the answer to that, but the way the world is going, it seems like it does have some, some validity. And I will preface and say that maybe there is some artificial intelligence behind the scenes going on that I don't know about. So, but direct knowledge, I do not know of any AI they're using.
Could you, this is my last question for you, unless your answer causes another question, but how do you interact with the model? Like, how do you interact with it?
My group interacts with the model by providing fuel prices, updated fuel prices for spot prices for dispatch that's used in the economic model. And we also provide transportation costs and any other restrictions that may have to be used in the model.
Okay, so if I'm just restating what I think I heard to make sure I understand it. So your team makes the inputs.
Part of the inputs, yeah, they do the gas inputs. There's others that do coal, and obviously reagents, and there's some other things that go into the model. There's weather, there's the demand, there's they call it unit outages. There's all types of different things that go into that model.
Understood, yes, sir. And then the decision is made based on the model outputs.
Yeah, so the model outputs a 7-day forecast, and within that 7-day forecast, there's also a room for uncertainty as well. So that's built into it for reserves. So we rely on that output for the peak demand for the day, for the megawatt demand. And like I said, there is some uncertainty factors that's put into it as well.
Okay, and this is one of these questions that it has come based on your answer. And I apologize because I thought the last question was my last question. Hopefully this will be my last question. Is there ever a time where the ultimate decision is opposite of what the model suggests?
I think I do not know the answer to that. I'm sure there's human intervention and everything. There's common sense that's put into it as well. But we do rely on the model based on the inputs. But we know that when it gives an answer, there could be a swag, right? We do know that, right? A lot of things can happen. By the time you run the model and something else happens, you have to make a change to your plan because the model might take 3 hours to run, right? So there is uncertainty, and we deal with that on a real-time basis.
Right. Thank you, sir. That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams. Commissioner Caston?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning still.
Good morning.
I know in previous hearings, and may have been you gentlemen, may have been others, but more than once, I think we've had discussions on stochastic modeling and probabilities, and I think FAST, which I've kind of forgotten what that acronym was now. What is that acronym again?
Stochastic, or the P90, or the probabilistic forecasts.
Well, other than this particular model, I suspect, I'm pretty sure based on other hearings that the company has numerous predictability models that run a huge amount of iterations with a bunch of different variable inputs, and it's kind of would be hard to do on your own, would it not be, with a slide rule and pencil?
Yes.
All the company's generation units, do all the company's generation units meet or exceed federal and state standards in every respect relative to emissions, environmental, so forth?
Yes, yeah.
And the modeling, as I understand it, especially this for dispatch, you're looking specifically at what's the most efficient, economical way to do this, correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. The model doesn't need to look at environmental or anything else. I'm asking this question. If you're meeting or exceeding existing federal and state regulations, is that a consideration, or should it be a consideration beyond meeting and exceeding federal and state regulations? It's not a trick question.
Yeah, that's a tough question, Commissioner. The company is, like you said, following the guidelines and meeting the standards, and so we're going to dispatch it as such.
I understand. And I was trying to think, how can I ask that question and make it not sound like a trick question? Because it wasn't. The company is doing what state and federal regulations say
Yeah,
do.
that's
Is
correct.
that
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Okay. And I wrote my question down, but I can't read it. So, and I can't remember if it was in response to questions from Commissioner Powers or whom, but I want to make sure I understood the answer. The FAST and other models have improved efficiency and cost since 2020, but the company does not have metrics necessarily to support that. Is that kind of what I heard?
They do have metrics. I don't, they're not off the top of my head. I don't know,
Okay.
What exactly they are. There are metrics.
But the purpose and intent of these models is to help the company, the people, operators, make decisions, buying fuels, and in your case, I guess, which dispatchable unit to use to do it as efficiently, effectively, and as least cost as possible, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, that's correct. And, from the generation side, the economic dispatch says which units run, and, our responsibility is to run the most economic unit, right? So if it's coal, it's coal. If it's gas, it's gas, and it varies depending on that.
I'm not criticizing. I just wanted you to just answer that. So
Yeah, that's correct.
Good, thank you. I bet I have some other questions, but I can't think of them. Thank you, gentlemen, both. I appreciate it.
Gentlemen, thank you for being here this morning. What's the purpose of economic dispatch?
It's really to provide a least cost, serve the load at the least cost for the customer to keep the customer's costs down.
And so all of these models that y'all utilize, that's to help you achieve the least cost unit at a given time?
Yeah, least cost overall serving the load, yes.
It's not just because the fuel happens to be least cost. You have to take in the environmental issues and other
there's a lot of variables that do go into that model, yes.
And these models get improved over time, is that correct?
Yes,
I mean,
they
you're
do.
not going to use a model from 1980 here in 2024. I think that's the year.
Our models take a lot of there's a lot of review, and they're updated as needed. Like I said, they do a lot of benchmarking, and they work with the vendors, and they look for better ways. Yeah, okay. We have a whole team.
And based on this this period under review, can you tell me your opinion on how the models performed?
My opinion is they performed as expected.
Okay. And Mr. McClay, you're my expert in hedging, is that right?
Yes.
I didn't qualify. I mean, she asked you to be qualified as an
Yes.
expert. I mean,
Yes, ma'am.
wasn't my idea. She asked. So, are there incremental costs that are incurred or associated with the company's natural gas hedging program?
We use the same people. The answer is no. We use the same people that we have. We don't hire anybody. We don't have any services. And we use, bilateral agreements. So there's no associated broker charges or anything like that. We take advantage of the collateral thresholds, which just means that we don't have to, until we hit a certain number, we don't have to post margin. So, so we've kept the costs as low as possible. There is nothing incremental.
Okay, and are the same folks doing the hedging for DEP and DEC?
Yes.
Kind of do it jointly. Is that
Yes.
correct? And that goes to the synergies that I believe you spoke to.
That's
earlier
correct.
With regard to purchases.
That's right, and they both have separate programs. So yes, there's synergies there.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate your response. Commissioner Carolee Williams, you have questions?
Yes, thank you, Chair Belzer. Mr. Flanagan, it appeared that there were no forced outages during the review period with the traditional renewable. Is that true?
No, they're listed in, I don't know that they're in my testimony. I know ORS had them pointed out in theirs as well. There were quite a few.
Okay. So that would be in Mr. Thompson's testimony. What it looked to me like there was a lower percentage, a lower number this year versus last year. Is that true?
Yes, year over year, there was an improvement. That's correct.
Can you describe what you would attribute that improvement to?
So kind of two separate sides. The combined cycle fleet operated very well. If you look at the NERC 5-year average compared to the combined cycle fleet, less than 1% forced outage rate. Most of that's just, operational excellence, fleet learnings, preventative maintenance, and things like that. The coal fleet actually went up slightly compared to the prior review period. Mostly due to some extended D rates at plants and some combustion issues on a unit at Roxborough. But, in general, it's the same preventative maintenance philosophy at both coal and gas. The way we manage, looking at trying to do preventative maintenance on the units. So, and the prior review period had a couple of larger unit outages that ran that number up. That wasn't as prevalent this year on the combined cycle side.
As I read your testimony, this question came to mind because of the relevance as the impact of data centers are being discussed about and in terms of reliability. Does the use of data centers make for a more efficient use of resources because of the constancy of that?
I'd have a hard time answering that without thinking through. I'd say not necessarily.
Okay.
Just thinking through off the top of my head. I think constancy's good at times, but when the rest of the system is also varying due to temperature, due to weekends versus daylight hours during night hours, it's hard for me to answer if data centers are directly tied to improve or harm that, to be honest with you. I'd have to think through that a little bit.
Well, I'll be thinking through
and
that
it's,
one.
to me, IRP question going forward for sure. Yeah.
Mhm. I appreciate the candor and the idea that we can continue to think about that one.
Yeah.
think I've got Mr. McClay.
Yes.
A hedging question.
Okay.
I didn't see it in the testimony, but just thinking about what we've gone through in the early 2020s, will there be a time where the contracts that we're relying on are ones that were purchased during times where we had supply issues, where interest rates were high, or does hedging allow you to ideally to avoid buying during that time frame? Does that
Right. So the hedging you're talking about is financial hedging, and we buy that consistently over time with smaller volumes out further, and then as it comes in each 12-month period, we layer in some more. So you get this smoothing effect. So yes, are you buying some high-priced out the curve, the curve? Yes, you are, but it wasn't as high as the spot market prices. They're much lower. It's less volatile the further out you go. So in 2020, we actually extended the term that we hedge out to 5 years so that we get that smoothing effect over time, and we're not subjecting ourselves to the spot market purchases. So hopefully that answers your question.
And I guess the question's probably more from what are we likely to be looking at next year in terms of impact on price to customers, and with that 5-year time frame, does the ability to purchase outside of those higher priced events cover? Will it, given the uniqueness, I'm gonna start over, given the uniqueness of what was happening in the early 2020s, do you predict that those prices will be smoothed out?
So yeah, it's very difficult to predict prices. I will say that if you look at our average cost, looking further out, our 5 years is very close to the average cost of where the NYMEX is trading. The NYMEX actually, that's the financial gas instrument we use. It's the Henry Hub. I'm sure you've heard it before. If you look out 10 years, the average is $3.70. The average. So it's a fairly consistent at this point in time curve. Supply and demand seem to be very balanced. But like what happened in the early what happened in 2021, there was a mismatch with supply demand. So we came out of a period where our demand grew and supply couldn't respond fast enough. We talked about that probably last year, but now you're at a point where supply and demand are in balance, and hopefully something like that, the market has more time to respond. It's looking into the future. Like I said, it's a fairly flat, liquid curve for hedging, procuring.
I think that's it for my questions, and I appreciate the education. I'll check my notes while my other peers may be asking questions. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Thomas?
Thank you. Thinking about hedging, and obviously there's a lot going on, and so given the price trends that we've seen over the last year or so, if the hedging had not been in place, would this reduction in the cost to flow through to customers been a bigger reduction in cost?
Yes.
So it's really more, as you said, trying to levelize costs, correct?
That's correct. And we do hedge for approximately 50% around that. The actual hedge percentage, can change based on burns, but that gives the opportunity for the customer to take advantage of the piece that's not hedged. So with lower prices, we're still buying lower spot prices.
Okay. And there are costs associated with hedging. Correct.
There could be costs, there could be losses, yes, and gains as well, yes.
Okay. And we've heard from different utilities that do not hedge, and you know, one of the reasons that they give is because of the cost. And I don't know how you decide, you know, what is in the best interest of the customer. Is it best to hedge or not hedge? I mean, I guess obviously Duke Progress thinks that it is. Is there any way you can help me understand that, why Duke Progress thinks it's a good thing and other companies?
Well, you know, I can't speak for other companies, but I know Progress, and you know, a larger and larger portion of our generation is natural gas, right? We're probably, I think, the second largest gas burner utility in the country. And so that's a lot of exposure for customers. You know, the whipsaws, the ups and downs. So by providing hedging, you're kind of reducing the volatility, and you're reducing that whipsaw effect, right, of really expensive, really cheap. So you're just kind of going in the middle, and that helps with customer bills. And yes, some years it might cost a little bit. It is insurance. It's not really there to make money, but it's there to smooth out.
All right, so, and maybe I'm wrong, but I'm thinking that the Duke subsidiary, Piedmont Natural Gas, I believe we've heard that they do not hedge. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I have them mixed up with somebody else. Do you happen to know?
I think they have I know they used to. I can't speak for them now, but their burn profile is a lot different than generation. They have that profile where they're, in the wintertime, they have the heating load. So they might have different, you know, objectives.
Okay. Well, I guess in part, you know, I was just thinking, okay, you work with a lot of the Duke companies, but you don't have interaction with them, even though they're another Duke company.
Not as much. We talk to them occasionally. We'll run into them, but not about things like that. No, but we do hedge in Indiana. I know that.
Okay. So I believe Mr. Flanagan, I believe this is for you. So there was some discussion about the Mayo plant and making a transition from one type of ammonia to another type of ammonia. I'm not going to try to pronounce the two. I'll let you do that. But can you tell me a little bit about that, why it was done, what's the benefit to customers?
Yeah, so there were some safety implications, as well as it allows for better removal of environmental constituents. So that was the primary NOx reduction. Yeah, and it was anhydrous to aqueous.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. That's all I have.
Commissioner Caston.
Thank you. Just a couple of follow-ups from all that question. Whether it's hedging or anything else, do you agree that it's the company's responsibility to do whatever the company can do, whatever you can do to achieve the best cost price for the customers?
Yes.
That's not my job, right?
It is. It's the company's job to keep costs down. Customers. Yes.
Good, because I don't want that job. I just want to know that the company is doing that.
Yes.
Relative to what you do, I think if I understood, you said about 50% of, I guess, your purchases are looking at the I guess, total fuel is you use hedging or buying those small portions or whatever. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's a range, but
Varies.
by the time you get to the prompt 12 months, our target is between, yeah, it averages around there. Yeah, could be a little higher.
And what I was curious about in some of the questions, you know, all the stochastic modeling conversations we've had, does the company have a similar, I don't know if I'd say, I guess predictability model, stochastic model, or whatever, that looks at relative to hedging, whatever it looked at. I mean, it seemed like so many variables in the world, I wouldn't even try to attempt it, but do you have a model that
Yes,
does?
there is the model that actually is looking at the gas burn and the various probabilistic outcomes using all the 100 scenarios. That in turn also produces a coal burn, a gas burn, etc. So you have the actual load, and then you have what comes out of that is the burn, the burns.
Okay, but carrying it further though, as far as looking at the hedging or the purchasing, this 50% of the stuff you purchase, these small quantities, does that particular model, or is it a different model that kind of helps based on the way it looks like things are going, weather, politics, whatever, we think, we ought to buy this much coal here, this much gas here. I mean, or do y'all just flip a coin? I mean, how do you do
No,
that?
so there's the shorter term model, right, that we were talking about,
Yeah, okay.
right? The day-to-day, 7-day. And then there's a longer term model that does the forecasting, because we need a forecast to hedge to. So there's that's a forecast that we get and gets updated periodically. And if you think about, so the burns are going to move around, right, based on the relationships between gas and coal and everything else. So that's why, another reason why you wouldn't go out and buy 100%, because you could wind up 120% or 80%. So that's why we use the forecast, and that's what we target. And it changes over time, and we change our hedging. Sometimes we have to stop hedging in the near term because we've hit our targets, and then other times we might have to hedge more if it shows a higher gas burn.
Thank you. That was very helpful, that correlation. I appreciate that very much. And thank you, gentlemen. I know I'd have more questions, but I'm just going to stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Anything further? Ms. Brown, any redirect?
No redirect, thank you.
Gentlemen, thank you for your testimony today. Appreciate your appearance. You may stand down. Let's take about a 13-minute break or so. We'll be back about 12:03. 12:03. Thank you. Good morning, and we are back from our morning recess as we continue in the hearing in docket number 2024-1-E. For the record, all commissioners are present in the hearing room. Mr. Trawick, you look ready to go.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The company would next call Ms. Kiva Hibbert and Ms. Wendy Fleener as a panel.
Thank you.
Ms. Hibbert will be covering value of solar, and Ms. Fleener will be discussing Act 236 customer programs.
Madam Court Reporter.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear affirm the testimony you're about to give to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Good afternoon now. Ms. Hibbert, would you please state your full name for the record?
Kiva Hibbert.
And by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm a lead rates and regulatory analyst at Duke Energy Business Services, LLC.
Did you prepare or cause to be prepared 7 pages of direct testimony that were pre-filed with the commission in this proceeding?
I did.
If I asked you the same questions that were asked in your pre-filed direct testimony this afternoon, would your answers be the same?
Yes, with one exception. On June 24th, 2024, I filed corrected direct testimony to reflect the appropriate lines for which marginal line loss values were calculated on page 6, lines 9 to 10 of my testimony.
Aside from that, do you have any additional changes to your testimony?
I do not.
Madam Chair, I would ask that Ms. Hibbert's corrected pre-filed direct testimony be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Ms. Hibbert's corrected pre-filed testimony will be admitted into the record as if given from the stand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Hibbert, did you also prepare a cause to be prepared one exhibit that was attached to your pre-filed direct testimony?
Yes.
Do you have any changes to that exhibit at this time?
No.
Madam Chair, I'd ask that Ms. Hibbert's pre-filed exhibit be entered as the next hearing exhibit in this matter.
Ms. Hibbert's pre-filed exhibit, which is marked Hibbert Exhibit 1, will be marked for identification as Hearing Exhibit 5 and admitted into the evidence of this case.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Hibbert, would you please provide a summary of your direct testimony at this time?
The purpose of my testimony is to discuss the 11 components of the value of distributed energy resources avoided cost contained in the net energy metering methodology approved by the Commission in Order Number 2015-194 and as updated in Order Number 2021-569, and to discuss any changes to the value of DER methodology that have been made since the 2023 field proceeding. Applying the avoided cost methodology and rates approved by the Commission in Order Number 2022-330, as well as updated input assumptions, the company has updated the 2024 value of NEM DER to $0.05141 per kilowatt hour for schedules RES, RTOUD, and RTOU-CPP, $0.05105 for schedule SGS, and $0.05212 for all other schedules. As explained in last year's fuel proceeding, the company developed tools and resources for the new marginal line loss modeling methodology, but needed to validate the methodology to ensure consistent results. This validation is still underway. While the company used its existing peak line losses for capacity losses, the company did use a marginal line loss methodology to determine energy losses. Marginal line loss values for avoided distribution primary lines are also used in the value of solar calculations in place of the previous line loss values. The company did not update the methodology for capacity losses because the avoided cost methodology already scales up the capacity value for peak losses. To the extent that generation occurs in the hours with capacity value, that value will account for peak losses avoided. The company has identified the benefits or costs of the following components of the value of NEM DER as 0. Avoided CO2 emissions cost, fuel hedge, utility integration and interconnection cost, utility administration, and environmental costs. Additionally, the company has updated the value of an MDR calculation based on the approved avoided cost methodology and avoided cost rates in orders 2019A and 2020 315A. As the amount of installed customer-owned generation increases, the company will continually monitor its impact to ensure safe and reliable grid operations. This concludes my testimony summary.
Thank you, Ms. Hibbert. Ms. Fleener, would you please state your full name for the record?
Wendy Fleener.
And by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm the Director of Clean Energy for Duke Energy Corporation.
Did you prepare or cause to be prepared 6 pages of direct testimony that were pre-filed with the commission in this proceeding?
I did.
And if I asked you the same questions in your pre-filed direct testimony, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Madam Chair, I'd ask that Ms. Fleener's pre-filed direct testimony be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Ms. Fleener's pre-filed direct testimony will be admitted into the record as if given from the stand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Fleener, would you please provide a summary of your direct testimony this time?
Yes. The purpose of my testimony is to provide an update on the status of the customer programs that the company implemented to meet the goals set by Act 236. The company fully dispersed its allotted 13,000 kW in solar rebates to South Carolina recipients, with its final payment in December 2021. The rebates will continue to be amortized and carrying costs determined over the duration of the 15-year amortization period through 2036. The incremental costs associated with the solar rebate program are the amortization of rebates paid, carrying costs on deferred amounts, and general and administrative expenses required to manage the program, as shown in Witness Harrington's Exhibits 10 and 12. The company's shared solar program, which launched in July 2018, was a means for retail customers to subscribe to and share in the economic benefits of a community shared solar program. To increase accessibility to the program, the company waived the application and initial subscription fees, a $120 value, for the first 200 low to moderate income participants. As of February 29th, 2024, DEP's shared solar program is almost fully subscribed. The company has executed one PPA totaling 5,000 kWAC, with 1,000 kW dedicated to the shared solar program. This facility became operational in December 2017. Since the Commission approved the company's DERP application in 2015, the company has utilized various communication and outreach tools to ensure solar stakeholders and retail customers have access to information about the company's programs and are able to communicate with representatives from the company about the programs. This concludes my testimony summary.
Thank you, Ms. Fleener. Madam Chair, Ms. Hibbert and Ms. Fleener are now available for questions from council and the commission.
Thank you, Mr. Trevick. Newcore Steele. Office of Regulatory Staff.
No questions, Madam Chair.
Commissioners, questions for this panel? Commissioner Carolee Williams.
Thank you. Ms. Fleener, you just said the number, but what is the monthly subscription fee that is being waived? What was that amount?
Yes, I am still here. The monthly subscription fee is $6.25 per kW subscribed.
And do you have any data about the percentage of low-income customers that have that charge waived?
So it was that first 200 applicants, and all of that has been fulfilled.
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate the clarification.
Commissioners, any Vice Chair Powers?
Ms. Fleener, you said the first 200. 200 out of how many? How many people are not getting it, I think is my question.
Yep, so I can give you a total. So right now we have a total of 80 market rate customers on the program. And then active programs is a total of 245. So people are always rolling and coming back onto the program.
Okay. How are these? I noticed on some bills that sometimes it says go to the website. Is it very clear how these people can join the program And the fact about the overcharge, is it put out there on the bill or is it sent to a website?
Yep, so a couple of things. So we do have a dedicated program page for this community solar program. So the URL is very easy for customers to find on any of the communication. Then also if you go to dukeenergy.com under, we have a renewables kind of subsection, renewables and EV. It's directly available there. We also has a search functionality on the website, so full details and transparency on the program are available.
Well, you know, if you're low income, you may not have access to the website.
Well, that's true. If they don't have access to the website, we do have a mobile version of the app. So I do think most folks do typically have some sort of accessibility, even if it's not from maybe a laptop or Wi-Fi from their home, so they could access it that way. And there's actually a specific page for income qualified. And then, of course, the customers could also call, as they would to Duke Energy for other types of issues if they did have questions, as well as we have an email box for the program. So we have someone that monitors that, and they could respond that way.
Maybe I'm still in the 20th century. I don't know. Do you know how many customers may have been charged in excess of the statutory cap?
Can you explain to me the statutory cap you're referring to?
Well, I mean,
The DERP charge. He's talking about the DERP charge.
Yeah.
I don't have that figure available.
Okay. All right. Thank you, ma'am.
Commissioner Justin Williams.
Good afternoon, ladies. How's it going for you all today? Good. Ms. Fleener, who could the commission question regarding any excess charges related to DERP?
I would need to maybe look over to my legal counsel. I don't know if we know, or we would maybe need to follow up with you on that. Who has that exact number?
Commissioner Williams, can I provide that answer for you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Teresa Reed will be testifying about that on the very next panel.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Commissioners, anything further for this panel? Hearing none. Mr. Trawick, any redirect?
None from the company.
Okay. Ladies, you got off easy. Thank you very much. That means your testimony was clear and complete. Thank you very much for your testimony today. You may stand down.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The company would last call Ms. Dana Harrington and Ms. Teresa Reed as a panel. Ms. Harrington will be covering rates, and Ms. Reed will be covering the DERP charge.
Ms. Sally.
Raise your right hand, please. You swear affirm the testimony you're about to give to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes, ma'am. I do. Thank you.
Ms. Harrington, can you put that name placard out?
Yes. Sorry about that.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Ms. Harrington. Would you please state your full name for the record?
Dana Harrington.
By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
Duke Energy Carolinas and Duke Energy Progress. I'm a rates and regulatory strategy manager.
Did you prepare or cause to be prepared 19 pages of direct testimony that were pre-filed with the commission in this matter?
I did.
If I asked you the same questions that were asked in your pre-filed direct testimony today, would your answers be the same?
They would.
Madam Chair, I'd ask that Ms. Harrington's pre-filed direct testimony be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Ms. Harrington's pre-filed direct testimony will be admitted into the record as if given from the stand.
Thank you. Ms. Harrington, did you also prepare or cause to be prepared 14 exhibits that were attached to your pre-filed direct testimony?
Yes, I did.
Do you have any changes to those exhibits at this time?
No, I do not.
Madam Chair, I would ask that Ms. Harrington's pre-filed direct exhibits be entered as the next hearing composite exhibit.
Ms. Harrington's pre-filed direct exhibits that have been marked Exhibit 1 through 14 will be a composite exhibit marked for identification as hearing Exhibit 6 and admitted into the evidence of this case.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Harrington, did you also prepare calls to be prepared 5 pages of rebuttal testimony that were pre-filed with the commission?
Yes, I did.
If I asked you the same questions asked in your pre-filed rebuttal testimony, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
Madam Chair, I'd ask that Ms. Harrington's pre-filed rebuttal testimony be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Ms. Harrington's pre-filed rebuttal testimony will be admitted into the record as if given from the stand.
Thank you.
And Ms. Harrington, did you also prepare calls to be prepared 3 rebuttal exhibits submitted with your rebuttal testimony?
Yes, I did.
Do you have any changes to those exhibits at this time?
No, I do not.
Madam Chair, I'd ask that Ms. Harrington's pre-filed rebuttal exhibits be entered into the record as the next composite hearing exhibit.
Ms. Harrington's pre-filed rebuttal exhibits, which I believe are marked Revised Exhibit 1, Revised Exhibit 11, and Revised Exhibit 13, will be a composite exhibit marked for identification as hearing Exhibit 7 and admitted into the evidence of this case.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Harrington, would you please provide a summary of your pre-filed direct and rebuttal testimonies at this time?
Sure. The purpose of my direct testimony is to provide Duke Energy Progress's base fuel costs, capacity-related costs, variable environmental costs, DERP avoided costs, and DERP incremental costs for the actual period of March 1, 2023 through February 29, 2024, the estimated period of March 1, 2024 through July 31, 2024, the projected billing period of August 1, 2024 through July 31st, 2025, and the proposed fuel and fuel-related cost factors. The prospective component of the base fuel rate that DEP is recommending for the billing period is 2.292 cents per kilowatt hour to recover the South Carolina retail share of $1.5 billion in projected system fuel expense. The anticipated base fuel under collection at July 31st, 2024 is approximately $39 million. The retrospective component of the base fuel rate that DEP recommends to recover the undercollected balance is 0.635 cents per kilowatt hour. The recommended total base fuel rate of 2.927 cents per kilowatt hour is uniform for all South Carolina customer classes. These recommended rates do not include gross receipts tax or regulatory fees. The South Carolina retail share of capacity-related costs, environmental costs, DERP avoided costs, and DERP incremental costs are allocated to South Carolina retail customer classes based on the firm coincident peak of the prior calendar year. Consistent with the Commission's order in the DEP South Carolina base rate case issued in docket number 2022-254-E, the transition from one coincident peak allocation factor to a 12 coincident peak allocation factor has been reflected in the proposed rates as of April 1, 2023, which was the date the new base rates became effective in that docket. For the billing period, projected South Carolina retail capacity-related costs are approximately $20 million, environmental costs are approximately $1.8 million, and DERP avoided costs are approximately $132,000. As of July 31st, 2024, the South Carolina retail anticipated capacity-related overcollection is approximately $10.3 million. The anticipated environmental overcollection is approximately $284,000, and the anticipated DERP avoided cost overcollection is approximately $46,000. When combined, the recommended capacity-related environmental and DERP avoided cost rates by customer class are 0.364 cents per kilowatt hour for residential customers, 0.322 cents per kilowatt hour for general service non-demand customers, 33 cents per kilowatt for general service demand customers, and 0.065 cents per kilowatt hour for lighting customers. The impact of the rates set forth in my direct testimony for an average residential customer using 1,000 kilowatt hours per month is a decrease of $6.23 per month, or 4.1%. For general service non-demand customers, the decrease is 2.9%, and for general service demand customers, the decrease is 5.4%. The increase in the average monthly bill for lighting customers is 0.1%. The purpose of my rebuttal testimony is to respond to the pre-filed direct testimony of ORS witness Jeffrey A. Gordon and submit 3 revised exhibits to support the proposed revisions to the DERP incremental rates before the Commission. As stated in my rebuttal testimony, billing period DERP incremental costs, which are allocated 100% to South Carolina retail customers, are projected to be approximately $2.7 million. The anticipated DERP incremental under collection at July 31st, 2024 is approximately $280,000. In my rebuttal testimony, I revised the proposed DERP incremental rates to exclude lighting customers from being allocated a portion of the $2.7 million in prospective billing period DERP incremental costs, or a portion of the anticipated DERP incremental under collection at July 31st, 2024 of approximately $280,000. Reallocating these costs exclusively to non-lighting customers increased the proposed DERP incremental rate for residential customers by 1 cent per month and commercial customers by 13 cents per month. Both customer classes remain under the per-account cost caps established in Act 236. The recommended billing period monthly per-account charges, including gross receipts tax and regulatory fees, are 90 cents for residential customers, $2.44 for commercial customers, and $100 for industrial customers. The industrial customer class has reached the per-account cost cap established in Act 236. In rebuttal testimony, I also revised the proposed DERP incremental rate for industrial customers from $99.49 per month to $99.51 per month to reflect the impact of a lower South Carolina gross receipts tax rate that will become effective July 1, 2024. South Carolina gross receipts taxes and regulatory fees comprise the difference between the proposed billed rate of $99.51 and the DERP incremental monthly per account cap for industrial customers of $100. The impact of the revisions set forth in my rebuttal testimony for an average residential customer using 1,000 kilowatt hours per month reduces the monthly decrease from $6.23 per month to $6.22 per month, and reduces the monthly decrease for the average general service non-demand customer from 2.9% to 2.8%. The company's actual period base fuel costs, capacity-related costs, environmental costs, and DERP costs are reasonable and reflect the company's continuing efforts to maintain reliable electric service in an efficient manner while complying with Commission-approved renewable energy initiatives, thereby minimizing the total cost to South Carolina retail customers. This concludes the summary of my direct and rebuttal testimony.
Thank you, Ms. Harrington. Ms. Reed, would you please state your full name for the record?
Teresa Reed.
And by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I am a Director of Rates and Regulatory Planning for Duke Energy Corporation.
Did you prepare or cause to be prepared 8 pages of rebuttal testimony that were pre-filed with the Commission in this matter?
I did.
If I asked you the same questions that were in your pre-filed rebuttal testimony, would your answers be the same?
Yes, with one exception. On June 21st, 2024, I filed corrected rebuttal testimony to provide updated numbers for the DERP overcharge issue. The number of affected accounts is 3,584, and the amount charged over the statutory cap is $69,956.12 in the aggregate. These changes were to lines 3 and 7 on page 6.
Aside from that, do you have any additional changes to your rebuttal testimony?
I do not.
Madam Chair, I would ask that Ms. Reed's corrected pre-filed rebuttal testimony be entered into the records if given orally from the stand.
Ms. Reed's corrected pre-filed rebuttal testimony will be entered into the records as if given from the stand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Reed, did you also prepare or cause to be prepared one exhibit that was pre-filed with your rebuttal testimony?
I did.
Do you have any changes to that exhibit at this time?
No.
Madam Chair, I'd ask that Ms. Reed's pre-filed rebuttal exhibit be entered in as the next hearing exhibit in this case.
Ms. Reed's pre-filed rebuttal exhibit that is marked as Reed Exhibit 1 will be marked for identification as Hearing Exhibit 8 and admitted into the evidence of this case.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Reed, would you please provide a summary of your testimony at this time?
Yes. The purpose of my rebuttal testimony is to provide an update to the Commission regarding the company's Distributed Energy Resource Program incremental charge, the status of its investigation, corrective actions moving forward, and the anticipated time frame for those corrections as recommended by ORS Witness Gordon. South Carolina Code Annotated Section 5839-150 establishes a cap for the DIRP charge based on revenue class, meaning annual revenue classification rates may not exceed $12 for residential accounts, $120 for commercial accounts, and $1,200 for industrial accounts. Under the company's current Rider 39 tariff, the per account DIRP charge is described to apply to each agreement for service covered under the rider. Accordingly, the company's billing system was configured to apply the charge to each service agreement unless the customer contacts the company to request only one DIRP charge covering multiple service agreements at the same premise as described in the tariff. For customers with 2 or more service agreements for the same account at the same premise with the same revenue classification, an account may have been billed more than one DIRP charge if the customer did not request to have the DIRP charge waived on their additional service agreements. This has resulted in some customer accounts being billed above their respective revenue classification annual limit. The company learned about this issue when the Commission flagged it in a customer complaint proceeding in docket number 2023-242E. The company then assembled a task force to conduct a thorough investigation. This task force engaged in comprehensive discussions covering relevant regulations, tariff language, billing system configurations, technical query requirements, and the development of action plans to correct the issue. The company is actively working to implement programming modifications to prevent similar issues in the future. When the company realized the DIRP charge issue extended beyond the customer who filed the formal complaint, the company promptly notified ORS and collaborated in meetings to address the issue. Through the investigation, the company determined approximately 3,326 accounts were impacted, and I would like to correct that. It's the 3,584 accounts were impacted. And then from January 2021 to May 2024, the amount exceeding the statutory cap is approximately $69,956.12 in the aggregate. On June 21st, 2024, I filed corrected rebuttal testimony to provide updated numbers in light of further review of the data in response to ORS's discovery. DEP has now determined that 3,584 accounts were impacted, and the amount exceeding the statutory cap from January 2021 to May 2024 was $69,956.12 in the aggregate. As of June 2024, the company has stopped applying more than one DIRP charge to the impacted accounts that are still active. For active accounts, the company proposes to refund the affected customers via bill credits by the end of August 2024. For inactive accounts, the company proposes to process refunds. The company is also proposing to modify Rider 39 to exclude the DIRP charge from its outdoor lighting rate schedules. Outdoor lighting service is typically an additional service agreement to a customer's primary electric metered service to which the DIRP charge already applies. The company is also proposing to eliminate the requirement that the customer contact the company in writing to request waiver of the DIRP charge, or the duplicate DIRP charges, where more than one service agreement is on the same account by the same customer on the same premise and within the same revenue classification. These changes are documented in Read Exhibit 1. If the Commission agrees with the company's proposed revisions to Rider 39 tariff, the company will implement configuration changes in the billing system after the effective date of the Commission's order, but no later than December 31st, 2024. This concludes my testimony summary.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. Madam Chair, Ms. Harrington and Ms. Reed are available for questions from council and the commission.
Thank you, Mr. Trawick. Nucor? No questions, Madam Chair. Thank you. Office of Regulatory Staff?
No questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Commissioners? Well, I'll go. Ms. Reed, I think most of my questions are going to be for you, and you may or may not know the answer, and that's fine if you don't. Are you aware that the DERP charge do you know when the DERP charge went into effect?
I believe in sometime in 2015, and I believe it was probably January of 2016.
Okay, there was an order issued in 2015.
Correct.
Okay, but the DERP charge, and I don't know the answer to this question, that's why I'm asking you. I don't know what date the DERP charge was actually put on bills. Do you?
I do not know the actual day that it started.
And based on your testimony, Duke, and I'm just using Duke for Duke Energy Progress, if you don't mind, did not go beyond 3 years looking back as to this charge. Is that correct?
We went back to January of 2021.
Okay. Are you aware that the order approving the DERP charge approved a settlement agreement that fashioned what the charge would be? Are you aware of that?
I am aware of that, yes.
And are you aware that in that settlement agreement there was a definition of what an account would constitute?
Yes, I am aware of that as well.
And yet the tariffs pages that were filed by Duke for the DERP charge did not comply with that settlement agreement and order. Is that correct?
The original versions filed in 2015, yes, I'm aware of that.
Okay.
Looking back at the history.
Okay. So I know that Duke has looked at going back 3 years. Why should there not be an action to enforce the settlement agreement filed by a party to that settlement agreement?
That is an excellent question, and I'm going to refer to some South Carolina code.
The regulation?
Yes, the
Okay.
regulation. Section 103.343A discusses when an error is found, that it references the statute of limitations, which is 3 years, so it references another statute, which is section 15.3.531.
Okay.
So this was not something that we were aware of until the commission flagged it, I believe in May of this year, 2024. So we went back to January of 2021 because that would be a full year for which the $12 statutory cap would have been applicable at that time and before that time, obviously.
Well, that's assuming that 343A is the applicable section. That's inadvertent overcharge. Why would this not be a willful overcharge? Willful not meaning nefarious, but that it was intentionally done.
Right. So I can speculate because I was not in charge in 2015 when the tariff was drafted and when rates went into effect. But based on my knowledge and my role now, and when I started in this role, we were not in the SAP environment. We were billing under a legacy billing system named CIM. And what I can piece together from different notes and things, there must have been a reason why the company asked customers, which I don't think is right, to notify us when they had multiple service agreements. And I'm assuming that is because it cost a lot of money at that time to make an update to the system to exclude it programmatically. So I'm not saying that it's right. I know that it's not right. I also know when the rate went into effect, it was not $1 like it is now. So I'm assuming that someone made a wise decision at the time, or a decision at the time, that this was a good practical approach to address the issue because of system limitations. I don't think it was the right decision in terms of the tariff, looking back on that now, but that's all I can surmise because I wasn't there at the time.
Okay, and I understand that, and I know you've been put out front here. So
I have.
Let me just put, Ms. Reed, I'm not mad at you.
I understand.
I'm not mad at Duke. I'm not mad at ORS or the commission. This is an issue. This is a problem, and we've got to figure out how to resolve it, okay? So I know you're probably getting some tough questions from me, and you may get some from my colleagues. Just understand, I'm trying to figure out how we fix this.
Absolutely.
Okay?
Yep.
That's where we are. Now, you're not a lawyer, are you?
I am in North Carolina.
Oh, you are?
I
Okay.
am. Not in South Carolina, though. I am not in that capacity.
No, I understand that. Okay. Well, all right. Well, that helps. Although I'm not asking for you to give legal advice, but
you.
the conundrum we find ourselves in is what I'm trying to work through. Okay. And part of the thing is, I would have loved to have been able to talk to the parties about this issue before we got to a hearing, but the structure that we find ourselves in, we can't do that. Okay. I know that the regulations are there, okay, but there's a statute that says it can't be more than $12 a year for residential, $100 for commercial, and $1,000 for industrial. First of all, let me ask this: of the number of customers that you've located, you and your team have located going back 3 years, are those all residential, or are there also commercial and industrial customers in
They
there?
are commercial and industrial, but I will caveat that the commercial rate is around $2 now. So we are correcting duplicate charges whether or not it exceeded the $120 limitation. We looked at duplicates and said if you had more than one charge meeting the definition within the order in 2015, we're going to go back and we are going to credit that amount back regardless to the $120 limit.
Okay, but just for the 3 years?
And through January 2021
Okay.
through current, unless ordered otherwise, yes.
I'm having trouble reconciling how this happened for so long without being caught. Okay, and I don't know what internal controls there are. I don't know how this got there. It just is not right in my mind. And I'm a lawyer, and I have to think about what's fair and what's legal and always what's fair. But we got to do what's right here. And I need to know the number of customers that have been impacted from the beginning and what kind of money we're looking at, preferably by class if we could. And because I am troubled that there was this settlement agreement, and you seem familiar with the order, so you recognize that the order stated, the settlement agreement said the parties agree. The parties agree, and that includes Duke, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. For the purpose of billing the DER component, the company shall define an account as all accounts serving the same customer, the same revenue classification, located on the same or contiguous properties, and that or contiguous I did not see in your revised exhibit, just FYI, ensuring that an account shall only receive one DER component charge per month. And then it goes further, certain accounts which serve in an auxiliary, that might be the part that was left out of your exhibit, serve in an auxiliary role to a primary account on the same premise will be exempt from charging. So we just had a colossal mistake or failure to comply with the settlement agreement. Would you agree with that?
I agree with that.
Okay. Don't take this personally. You're just the one that I don't know if you drew the short straw or what, but you're the one that got put out
I did
there.
draw the short straw, but I'm okay. I'm not taking this personally.
It's not.
We've got to resolve this, and I agree with that. We're
figuring out how to resolve this thing.
Yes.
And it shouldn't be the customer that is that draws the short straw, so to speak, in my mind.
I agree with
so
that.
So help me.
So one of the challenges, and it's not impossible, but I'll just explain to you the challenge with data prior to SAP is that we did not, when we archived SIM, we were asked to provide queries and reports that we thought we would need should we have to go back into the old system and pull that information out. And so I know from my team's perspective, we look at aggregate billing data. We don't always drill down into individual customer data because I'm on the rate side and we're setting rates. We did not anticipate this issue we didn't anticipate the statutory issue. So the data is there. It is archived. It is just not retrievable in the same way as it would have been if the system is active. So we can go back and get that information. It will take time and resources to do that because it's not an easy process to go in and figure that out. And we'll have to determine what rates were in effect at what time to figure out when the statutory limit may have been compromised. It is not impossible. But for exercise of what we have prepared today, we did go back the 3 years, but we can go back further. I just want to explain that there is a wrinkle there that it will take time to do that.
When did the SAP system become effective that you can go back with these queries?
I believe in 2021.
Okay.
November for
subject
DEP.
to check.
Yes,
November.
subject to check.
Okay.
For DEP.
November 2021 for DEP.
And then prior to that, that was the SIM?
Yes, CIM, Customer Information System.
Okay. Would you agree with me that the normal usage of a statute of limitation, the statute of limitations law, is the length of time that a person can bring an action from when let's just use the word breach occurred or a cause of action arose? Is that fair? If I have a contract with Duke and I realize that Duke is overcharging me, I have basically 3 years to bring in cause of action, so to speak.
Yes, depending on the
Okay.
facts and circumstances, yes.
But when does that time begin? When does it start to run?
So that is an excellent question, and I'm not in the capacity of a lawyer here.
No,
so
you're not.
I'm not gonna.
Okay.
I won't be able to answer that
All right,
question.
let me phrase it. Let me see if you can. And I may have to engage in some gymnastics with counsel before the day's over. But I would need some reasonable notice that there is an action, that I have a cause of action against somebody, not just Duke, but somebody, to be able to, for that statute of limitations to start. Is that correct? Generally?
Generally.
Okay.
Yes.
So I reckon, and I know what the regulation says, and I know what the statute says, but the problem I've got here is I don't know how a customer could understand they were being overcharged when Duke itself didn't even understand that it was overcharging. So to say that a statute of limitations only says to go back 3 years, when it wasn't even something the company was aware of. Any thought, response? Defer to council.
I agree that it would have been very challenging for a residential customer to know, or any customer to know. And the complication is that the rate wasn't the max over the time, and a number of factors would have had to occur within that time as well.
Okay.
So I agree with you that it is hard.
Well, and let's go
to
back,
know.
and I appreciate that answer that it wasn't at the max. But then we go back to the order approving the settlement agreement and the settlement agreement itself that said only one DER charge per account that's been violated.
Correct.
See, I mean, you see the conundrum we're in, right?
Yes, and I completely understand that, because we met every day for a month in the same conundrum and trying to figure out how this happened. And really, I think it boils down to the tariff. The folks that are on the billing side, if you read the tariff, it doesn't read that way, and it doesn't really indicate that there's a statutory limit that we have to adhere to. So I believe that the folks that were in the hearing in 2015 that agreed to all these terms and conditions understood it, but that knowledge didn't transfer down through a document that we all read and see on a day-to-day basis. And so I agree with you that this is a conundrum, and we are here, we admit fault, it's our fault. It doesn't matter what the tariff says, we have to abide by the statute, and we're here to fix it.
The language that did show up in the tariff, is that something that's been used elsewhere? Do you know?
So
because it's not the same in DEC.
That is correct. It is not the same in DEC. It shows up in North Carolina.
Oh, okay. That language that I don't understand, and it's like, where is this coming from? Is approved in North Carolina?
It is approved in North Carolina. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. That's all I have for the moment, but I may be back. I'm trying to gather my thoughts. Oh, we got lots of lights. Commissioner Justin Williams. I'll start again and work back.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Reed, thank you for your testimony, and I can't see your placard, ma'am. What is your name? Ms. Ms. Harrington. You know, the chair spent so much time on Ms. Reed, I forgot about Ms. Harrington. Ms. Reed, I would disagree with you. I do not think that you drew the short stick. I think the company put their most capable witness up to help the commission work through this issue, and you're doing a great job.
Thank you, sir.
I appreciate your straightforward approach and your transparency. That is obvious to me. And you should even feel better about yourself than you probably do before my comments, because there was a issue that another utility had, and they sent someone to talk about it all by themselves. And you have your whole team here. I even see your president back there. So while it can always be better, it can always be worse. So you're doing a great job, and I think your team supports you.
I appreciate that.
Yes, ma'am. And thank you for letting us know that you're an attorney. I did not know that. I don't know. Maybe I knew it and forgot it, but thanks for that. I am not going to go the route that our chair went with you. I have more of a strategic or higher level line of questioning that that focuses on the general faith and trust in the system, if you will. And I'm using the word system loosely. And if you don't mind me just recapping to help me get to where I'm going, I would appreciate your patience if that's okay.
Yes, sir, that's fine.
From my memory, and you are welcome to correct me if I'm wrong, we got to the discussion of excess DERP charges through a hearing with a customer regarding their belief that they were being overcharged. From your knowledge, is that a fair, simple summation of how we got here?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Are you familiar with the public night hearings that we have in rate cases generally?
Generally, yes.
Okay. Have you ever attended any of those or heard any discussion about some of the testimony that we receive in those public hearings for rate cases?
Usually second hand.
Okay.
Other colleagues go and then they relay information back to me that is rates oriented.
Right.
So we can have an opportunity to try to address those concerns if we can.
Right, right. And I think that's a fair description of what I've seen in those public hearings. Do you think it's fair to say that it's possible that some of your customers may not have 100% trust in the company and their operation, specifically as it relates to rates?
I can accept that.
Okay.
Yes.
So here we are in a situation where we have excess charges, and you did a pretty good job explaining how you believe we got here by giving that history. And maybe you can't answer this question. Maybe no one can answer the question, but I'm still a little bit unsure at how exactly this happened for so long, to the extent that no one really picked up on it until not even lay witnesses, until customers, pro se customers, brought a complaint before the commission. And even if I understand correctly, even during the course of the hearing, with testimony given by the customers and exhibits admitted into evidence, there still wasn't, if my memory serves me correctly, there still wasn't an identification or a spotting of the issue of overcharging. Is that fair?
That is fair.
Okay. So moving forward, how can the commission or ratepayers trust the company's rates based on this situation before us right now?
I think that's a fair question as well. And I will say that I have no excuse for this DERP issue. It was wrong, and we're going to fix it. I can assume that it's related to technology challenges in the past. I think we could have done a better job with the tariff, explaining the statutory cap. But I respect my folks on the SAP side because they take our tariffs and they bill according to what our tariffs say. So I drew the stick today because I'm in charge of the tariffs and implementing rates. I will say that we have a number of controls to make sure that our tariffs and our rates that customers pay purport to the tariff. So that is why we file changes to tariffs and updates to tariffs when we feel there is ambiguity or things are not clear or there's an opportunity to make things better. And what we do is very complex, and there's no excuse for this issue at all. But I will say that, and I'm a little bit familiar with this particular customer's issue, my understanding is that the only rates issue was the DERP charge. So everything else we did right. And unfortunately, when you do one thing wrong, it kind of undermines the confidence or the confidence that you have in everything that we do right. But I will say that I believe my team and others on our SAP team, we have a number of controls. We have a number of things backing up our controls, like our audit processes, external auditors, making sure that we are billing according to our tariffs. And I believe we can get to a resolution with this issue, with the tariff changes. We're open to more tariff changes to make it as clear as possible. I went back and I didn't know, or I don't know of any statutory limit on anything else. This is a bit unusual. This is the only rider that we have that's fashioned this way. So I think that our focus should be on fixing this and continuing to get everything else right so that we can build confidence in our rates and our processes.
That's an outstanding answer, and I just want to reassure you that this is not about you. You just happen to be here now. It reminds me of what my folks used to tell me, is that sometimes children will suffer the sins of their mother and father. So you wasn't there then, you're here now. I get it. I'm not questioning you or your people. I'm questioning the system. So when you say that you're doing everything else right, well, as far as we know, because I think you thought you were doing this right before, right? So we don't know until we know.
That is true.
So I'm not trying to undermine your credibility or
Right.
the company's credibility. Unfortunately, we are where we are, and because we are here, we have to ask these difficult questions.
And I understand.
You understand? All right. So you're not mad at me.
Absolutely
All
not.
right. I want to be friends as much as we can. I'm a little unclear as to whether or not the customers you identified that were overcharged include residential customers, because it sounded as if you said it's just industrial and commercial.
It includes residential, and 90% of the accounts we identified have an outdoor light.
Okay.
So that is why we are suggesting removing the outdoor lighting rates so that a charge can't be applicable to those, and that will fix 90% of the problem that we've seen on the DEP side. For DEP, we do have commercial accounts, and the rate is, roughly $2.40. The cap is about $12 a month, so it would mean that you would have to have multiple points of delivery to get to that $12 limit. But if you have one that fits the definition that's in the order, we are going to waive the other three and refund back to January 2021 so that we can cover the full year of 2021. And for industrial customers, that rate has been high I won't say high, but it's been closer to the cap for a longer period of time. So those customers will see the largest refund just because it's been close to $100. So you imagine $100, multiple points of delivery, times however many months, times however many years. So it does include residential, commercial, and industrial, and we've included everything to our knowledge to date.
Thank you, ma'am. I think I understood you correctly, or understood you clearly when you said that it's possible to go back to whenever the charge was first allowed to determine what the total overcharges are, but it may be difficult. Is that a true statement, that you can go back? It just may be somewhat difficult and potentially costly.
We can go back. It will be time consuming and different resource. We'd have to have IT type resources to write queries to be able to access the archived information, to be able to determine what overcharges existed over the course of the number of years we're talking about.
Okay. So, and that's a yes. The company
Yes.
can go back and
Yes.
we can, or at least to identify what was overcharged and who was overcharged. At the very least, that's a possibility that can be done.
Yes, it can be done.
Okay. So this question is somewhat connected to the DERP charge, but not directly. In terms of the company's expectations of their customers at all levels, I would assume that the more sophisticated the customer, the more involved and engaged they may be with the company regarding their billing. So I'm not going to focus on commercial or industrial. I'm going to focus on the residential customer. What is the company's expectation for the residential customer as it relates to reviewing their bill to determine whether or not there are issues such as an overcharge?
So, relative to this issue, I don't think a customer should have to read a tariff to figure out whether they're being overcharged. I think it is solely on Duke Energy to make sure that we are charging one charge per account, per customer, per premise, or contiguous, as defined in the settlement agreement, thus documented in the order. I do not think it's a customer's responsibility to figure that out.
Thank you, ma'am. Do you have how do you plan to communicate all of this to your customers? The issues regarding the overcharge. Is that something that you oversee? Like, how will this information be delivered and explained?
So I work with a number of folks, but in my testimony, I talk about our communication protocol. We are going to, when we issue the credit on accounts or send a letter with the refund check, we're going to explain what happened and how it happened, and describe why the customer is getting the credit on their bill for this particular issue. So, and I have that documented in my testimony. I can point to it if you want to know exactly what I indicated there. I don't recall on the top of my head, but I can point to that if you'd like.
No, I don't need. I mean, it's there. I'll be honest with you, Ms. Reed. I like live testimony better than the pre-filed testimony. So I just wanted to hear what you would say regarding that. So, but I understand what you're saying, and I know what you're referring to. This may be a delicate question, and you can pass on it if you want to. If the commission determines that the company should go back to determine all of the excess overcharges from the first up until the last, and the company does so at some expense and time, do you think the ratepayer should pay for that work, or do you think the company should pay for it? The time and expense related to identifying the excess charges.
So I'm going to pass on that question because I'm not sure how and how much that would cost and what we would do in order to get that information out of that legacy system. So I don't know what our next steps would be related to that.
All right, that's fair. That's all the questions I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. I want to follow up with one question and one response. I believe you mentioned with regard to looking back and that even with the double charges, that some of the total DERP charge on some of these bills was still under the statutory cap. Does that ring a bell?
Yes.
Okay. But that is still contrary to the settlement agreement, is it not?
You're right.
I just want to be clear on that.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Are y'all okay going? Because we're kind of hitting my lunch hour time, but I'd rather just, if y'all okay finishing this up, y'all okay?
Yes, I'm good.
Miss Sally, you okay? Okay. Vice Chair Powers?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I guess I want to take it just one step forward. In your explanation, Ms. Reed, in your rebuttal testimony on page 3, you explained it that the way it was configured, it was up to the customer to contact and request the waiver to get it right. You think it's fair to put the burden on the customer? Does that really seem fair?
Absolutely not.
I mean, with the company having the knowledge.
The customer would not have the knowledge to be able to do that. So I agree with you. And in my Read Exhibit 1, I've struck in that language, and that's approved. And going forward, we will not have that requirement for a customer to contact us.
Okay. And then I want to go to Ms. Harrington. Ms. Harrington, I think in your direct testimony, you said that the company couldn't meet the mandate of the 2023 case without hiring additional staff.
You're speaking of the forecast?
You never, but you didn't give us those costs. What was that, your projection of the cost?
To add staff to model an additional, I'm not aware of what the quantity would be. It would be additional headcount. So whatever an additional personnel would be. Plus, I'm not exactly sure about the timing of data availability. I know when we discussed this a couple years ago when the mandate came out that the forecast had to be within 30 days of the direct filing testimony, that there's also running the systems take a couple of weeks, I think it's weeks. Then they have to do the two parallel, because we're still two separate entities, and we have to do all the JDA modeling. We have to run a coalesced version of our forecast, and then they also run two independent versions of the forecast to assess the JDA delta. And so it's a lot more extensive literal time on the clock, not human labor, but technical runs times of the systems, days or weeks, to run all that information, coalesce it, pull it apart, isolate the parts that are needed for merged data points, and then review that and produce it for us to use downstream in rate making. So I know that there was a time factor, a technological factor, and a headcount factor. All three put us outside of that 30-day window to getting a forecast in within 30 days. So it may not be exclusive of just the cost.
When did the company realize they could not meet the 30-day deadline?
The original request. We've not met it since the initial.
Did the company provide notice to this commission in advance of this proceeding, either in either docket, that it wouldn't be able to meet the 30-day deadline, or would just?
The original order, I believe, stated that we should do it within 30 days or give our explanation as to why we hadn't met it. And it didn't request advance notice. It did request explanation and testimony. Every year we've complied with explanation and testimony.
Shouldn't we have had that in advance?
Not in advance, sir. With testimony.
But you don't think we should have had that in advance?
It wasn't requested that we file it in advance. So we've met the obligation. If you desire to order it differently going forward, we could do so.
And either of you could answer this, and it's pretty much the same question Commissioner Williams just asked you. Do the ratepayers, should they bear the cost of the additional people, the additional work, the additional money? You've been to law school. There was a term, unjust enrichment. I remember hearing way back when I was there. I imagine they still use it, don't they?
Yes. I've been out of law school for a while, but yes.
I've been out a long time. What's fair? Is it fair for the ratepayers to, you just going to put it back in the rates and they pay it later on, or should the shareholders in the company bear the cost of this? Either one of you welcome to answer.
Would you specify what content you're speaking of? Are you speaking of the DERP charge or the forecast?
Well, you got this money you weren't entitled to, and now it's going to cost money to fix it, to give it back to the people who are entitled to it. Who should bear that cost?
I appreciate your question. I do. I think there's a misunderstanding at hand. The company never recovered monies it wasn't, as you said, entitled to. The costs were not incurred imprudently. They were incorrectly assigned to our customer base, but the costs themselves were not imprudent. So to date, when we had a larger population of customers paying, the prudently incurred cost rates were lower. So everyone has benefited to date that the DERP incremental rate has been lower per individual or per paying customer. When we increase or inflate that, the opposite. When our population shrinks, we'll be assigning our prudently incurred costs over a fewer number of folks. Therefore, the rates will go up. So it's just a matter at this point. It's your judgment, however you want it implemented. But in my opinion, we asked the non-lighting folks to pay too little, and then we asked the lighting folks to pay when they may have been paying under a different header, res, commercial, or industrial. So now to give them their monies back, we really need to get it from who benefited, who paid a lower rate than should have been established thus far.
Okay, so the company received money they were not entitled to because they were billing people wrong, and you're saying this is a benefit to these people?
All the rate payers paid a lower rate. Every year that we've come in and proposed a DERP incremental charge, we had a larger population than we knew we should have used. We should have used a much smaller population for assignment.
But you got money that you weren't entitled to.
We billed a low rate for too many folks.
I'm not talking about the low rate. I'm talking about the DERP charge, the extra DERP charge. It was an extra dollar charged to a lot of people, and extra other amounts charged to a lot of people that you weren't entitled to. That's cash that you got. Regardless of whether you failed to charge the right amount earlier, that's money that somebody else is entitled to.
I see what you're saying. The individual, yes, sir. I see what you're saying. I guess it's a matter of perspective as to, I guess I'm focusing on, I'm the rates person. I'm kind of sterile. I'm looking at the numbers and I'm looking at calculating what I'm going to ask everyone to pay. So if I look at it mathematically, not personally, just mathematically, if I may use an example, if we've got $1,000 of a cost, any cost prudently incurred, and we have 500 folks to pay it, and unbeknownst to us, some of those folks are wearing different hats. They might be wearing, the state hat, and they might be wearing the city hat, and we don't know that. We think we're billing all the city folks, but we're billing city and state. Then if you divide that $1,000 by 500 heads, that's $2 per customer per head.
Let me just stop you there. You are avoiding answering my question. If you charge more than one DERP fee in excess of the statute as mandated, it sounds like you're not entitled to that money. Is that fair?
We're not entitled to bill it that way, sir. You're correct. Okay. I'm confused. I'm very sorry.
It's not fair, is it?
No, sir.
Okay.
The billing implementation
That's what I was trying
correct.
to get to.
Yes, sir.
It's not fair. Should the ratepayers turn around and have to pay for what's not fair?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Caston.
Thank you, and I'll be swift because I'm hungry too. My stomach's growling, and I was afraid y'all were going to hear it. So. I had a couple of questions too, but I think it's all covered. Having had some involvement with utilities in the past, my experience was not if a mistake or error occurs, but when, because it's going to occur. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
But what was at least important to me, our leadership, because it happened. And we had some that, we caused because it seemed like a good idea at the time. Others, stuff just happened. We just didn't know it. Unintended consequences are just an error, simple as that. But what was very important to me and us, at least in my previous slide, was what we did about Does that,
Yes, sir.
do you agree?
Absolutely.
And honestly, it was also my experience that a lot of, well, I don't know if it's a lot or a little, but some errors and mistakes, you know, really could have been kept internal. Nobody would have really ever known it, in some things. You know, some things, you run out of water, everybody knows it. Yeah, turn on the tap, nothing comes out. But there were a lot of things that wouldn't be known. But again, what was important, at least from my perspective, previous life, was it wasn't a matter of whether anybody knew it or not. If we knew it and it cost the customer more, could or whatever, what we did about it is what mattered. Would you agree with that?
Yes, sir.
And I don't know how I feel other than maybe empathy, sympathy or something, because you guys have done a yeoman's job, and you know I expect it's tough sitting there. And I think every question that was asked was a good question. Matter of fact, I wish I'd thought of some of them. But I thought you answered well. And with that in mind, I did want to say this, that since I really have no questions beyond that I ask, and just because you talked the longest, I guess, I do want to say, Ms. Fleener, that I know you weren't testifying in law, but simply responding and answering questions with forthright answers. I appreciate your candor. I do. And yours, Ms. Harrington. I just...
Thank you.
Thank you.
You answered questions that maybe you didn't feel comfortable with, but I felt like you answered them straightforward. You didn't try to hide behind anything, it seems. You didn't use a lot of words, try to confuse. I appreciate that. So that's all I really wanted to say.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you very much.
I don't know anyone that doesn't appreciate candor more. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Thomas, did you have a question?
I excuse me, yes, I do. I have, I think, a pretty quick question. This is a follow-up to a question that Commissioner Justin Williams asked, and he asked about the costs that could be or would be incurred in order to figure out what's the right amount that should have been incurred. And anyway, so basically going to run into some costs to figure all this out. And my question is, do you think it would be appropriate for us to ask the company to identify and segregate those costs so that an appropriate decision could be made later as to whether or not the company can recover those costs?
Yes, I think that is appropriate.
Okay, and I'd just like to follow up with what the other commissioners said. Appreciate all that you all have done here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Commissioner Carolee Williams?
Thank you, Chair Belzer. Ms. Harrington, I've got one question for you.
Yes, ma'am.
On page 3 of your testimony, at the towards the bottom of the page, you talk about the decreases and then the increase.
Yes, ma'am.
This is just a curiosity, and I don't want it to get confused with the other conversation we're having about lighting, because I get this
Right.
is totally different.
Mhm.
But why are lighting costs going up ever so slightly, but they're going up when everything else is going down?
That's a very astute question. Thank you. The rate, it has to do with cost allocation. In the rate case, and I mentioned this in my testimony as well as my testimony summary, in the most recently approved rate case, we transitioned from one coincident peak
Okay.
to 12 coincident peak. So we began allocating costs instead of at that highest peak hour of a calendar year, 8,760 hours. Now we've converted to the highest peak hour averaging all the months. And so that begins to integrate into our peak assessment when lighting is contributing to the peak demand. So if you have winter months and the lights are coming on at night in the peak cold nights, it's beginning to contribute to our load at peak times. So they've begun to get a cost allocation for the subsets of costs that are capacity related, environmental costs, and DERP avoided costs where they never had before. So it's just bringing them from a 0 rate to a negligible rate. Their peak contribution in these proposed rates is 0.2% of peak, so 0.2%.
Would you explain that last part to me again?
Yes, ma'am.
Their
contribution to peak. So the average of each of the 12 months, its highest hour in every month, that average, who's driving that demand?
Okay.
Which customer group? They've got their 0.2% of the full load in the average of the 12 months peak.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Ms. Reed, I appreciate, as to everybody in this room, your coming forward and kind of the expression of the circumstances that we've been that's been uncovered, and the desire to make it right. I just have a handful of questions to sort of follow up. One is related to inactive customers. To what extent can you find those customers? Is there an effort to do that? And is there kind of a cost justification associated with doing that?
So, of the 3,500 and some odd customers, 400 of them are inactive. So we have the last address in our billing system for those customers, and that will be the address that we send the refund to, unless an inactive customer owes us money, has an amount that is in arrearage, and then we would apply whatever credit is owed to those customers. And just for context, for the total amount over the 3 years, it's roughly $20 on average per customer that the refund would be applicable to. And averages, there's some that are less and some that are more.
And can you answer that question as it relates to customers prior to 2021? I know you haven't looked at those, but just in general?
I cannot answer that for the period of 2015 through 2020 in the older billing system. We would have to do some analysis of that to determine which customers and how much would be due to those customers and whether they're active or inactive.
Right. And related to that analysis for 2015 to 2020, what kind of time are we talking about it taking to understand those numbers?
So I think and this is subject to, I'm not in IT, so let me, so just want to make sure that I caveat that, and that, ultimately we would need to give a response to that from folks that are doing that particular role. But I would say 3 to 6 months, depending upon the complexity. We would need to identify when the rates went in, when the rate changes occurred. We would have to help them set up the query. They would have to set up the query, and then we would need to do some validation.
Okay. Witness Gordon recommended that we resolve this next year. How does that fit with the amount of time it's going to take to do this data mining to understand, if we were to order you all to look at the 2015 to 2020. Do you have a perspective on whether there's a mid-year point or a waiting until a year from now to resolve something that's been going on for a long time?
So, if we decide to go back to the beginning, I think it's reasonable to have all of the 2015 to 2020 time frame resolved within a year for sure. I think, though, for immediacy and customers that are affected now, that we know, I think we have an obligation and we need to go ahead and credit those customers back as soon as possible and fix this going forward and test it to make sure that going forward we're not seeing any additional issues. But I think it's reasonable to have everything complete if we go back to 2015 or 2016, whenever the billing actually started, to get everything done, if that is the direction we need to go in.
You didn't say this, but this is what you made me think. So maybe you did say it, and I just didn't hear it. Is there an option and a value to the immediacy of resolving the 2021 to 2024 customers that you know about, and making a separate decision about those customers that are 2015 to 2020?
I think the value of getting the ones that we know done now is that we have the information. We have limited inactive customers, so the longer we go, the more inactive customers we may or may not have. And I think it's the right thing to do. If someone owed me money, I'd want it. I'd want it right away. So I think that's the right thing to do until we decide what to do with that period of time where it would take us a little longer to figure out what customers would be owed potentially.
Okay. And for your testimony where you corrected the numbers regarding the number of accounts and the total estimate or cost that exceeded the statutory cap, would you describe a little bit about how you thought you had the right number, and then what happened that led you to update these numbers? Does that question make sense?
It does. And so our initial query, there's a number of elements to it. So let's say you're a customer and you are on a rate schedule and you have several points of delivery, so several meters with that same rate schedule. The query wasn't always identifying each of those because they were on the same rate schedule. So when we went back and we started looking at individual queries and doing some sampling, we saw that it wasn't picking up everything that we needed to pick up in the query. So we went back and we fixed the query, and then we fixed our numbers to reflect that. And also when that query was done, it was done in May. When we picked up the query for June, when we did our final review, that reflected some change within just the time of when we did the initial query to when we, are ready to issue our refunds. And I will say that there is a possibility, because our tariff is needing some updating. So if a customer establishes service or lighting service today, we technically, our folks in the call center should pick up that there's an additional account there, and then waive that DERP charge. But if that doesn't happen, it's a possibility that customer could get another DERP charge. So we anticipate this amount to grow a little bit until we make that correction. But we are going to go back and fix everything. So I just want to make sure you're comfortable with that. We recognize that there's just timing differences that we have to address.
Right. tell me if this is true, once a decision's made, you'll put that in place, and going forward, you can rely on no one else entering the pool of people who've been double charged.
Yes. So, but
Yes, but
yes, but there is a verification process. I think that there are always circumstances that you can't plan for. So, for example, some of the things that we saw is, let's say you have a bill in December, and then we somehow recalculate your bill in January. Well, that was really last year's DERP charge, but it's this year. And if we do a query, it picks up as if we charged you too much in the year, or if you final out. So there's all these little circumstances. So we picked up everything. There's a refund for 3 cents because of that situation where we did a proration, and it resulted in just slightly over that $12. So that's why I said we need to put it in, and then we need to test, because we don't know every scenario that could happen. And I think it's reasonable to test and make sure we've got this right, particularly going forward.
This is another one of those, you didn't actually say this, but this is what I'm interpreting from what you're saying. We almost have 3 circumstances. One is the people you know about now. The second would be those that, due to query changes or due to things that happen between now and August, that they, like you said, the numbers in your testimony can change for a variety of reasons. So there's that bucket that might not get included in those initial changes. And then there's the question of 2015 to 2020.
Correct. I agree with that.
This is more of a general, different line of questioning, but are you aware of anyone who applied to, who knew about what the language in the tariff and who applied and asked that that they have a waiver?
I have not personally looked at any accounts, because our query wasn't looking for that scenario. But I am aware that not every account that had lighting experienced the issue. So I'm assuming that either when the person set up the lighting service, there was a customer service rep that asked the question and waived it for them. Or there was more information and training back in 2015, 2016 when this was released. That's my assumption, but I'm not 100% sure.
As you may know, sometimes I ask questions that I can't figure out how to ask them until after I've asked them once, but I want to delve a little bit into the language I think Chair Belzer mentioned regarding contiguous properties. At this point, have you looked at circumstances where contiguous properties, I think by statute, were not intended to have duplicative charges? Have you looked?
So our interpretation of that is a field that we call premise. So it could be, you can have a barn here and a house here, and maybe separate addresses but the same premise. So we consider a premise being the location of the service address and then the contiguous property around the service address. So if it has the same premise, that's how we're able to determine whether there should be one charge.
Okay. And you've queried based on one premise, which includes potentially contiguous
properties.
Properties or accounts?
Accounts. Yes. Okay. Or what we call service agreements, because I want to make that's So there's an account. I can be, Teresa Reed account, and I could have a service agreement for my metered service, and I could have a service agreement for lighting, and I can have a service agreement for another structure. So we're talking about the account level having the $12 charge if it's on the same premise, which means all three of those, even though they may be in different locations on the premise, all that rolling up to one account. So that's how we did the query in order to determine contiguous
Okay.
service agreements.
You may enjoy this. When you said the word premise, I was thinking more of a legal term than a land use planning kind of term. So I've been doing this long enough that I appreciate your clarifying it.
Yes.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
2 quick questions. Follow-up.
Questions?
Yes, ma'am. Actually, I wanted to read y'all this book. No, I'm kidding. Ms. Harrington, in a follow-up, I guess, a response you had, Commissioner Williams, where you talked about 1CP, 12CP, and how I think, light charge going up on the lighting, I think. And I know we discussed this, I think, in the DEC hearing. There was some discussion on it. When did, I guess relative to DEP, when did the 12CP go into effect? I don't recall.
April of 2023.
A little over a year ago.
Yes, sir. The base rates case was approved as of implementation date of that date.
When do you know, over, say, a 12-month period, has going from 1CP to 12CP affected customer bills, all classes, either up or down?
I do not know. That's a good question. I mean, it depends on all the other factors going into the actual rate or the actual bill. I'm sure it can vary based on their peak usage and costs at the time that you're taking the reading.
No other DEP folks coming up that I could ask, is there? Yes. Well, let me ask you this. Relative to that, going from 1CP to 12CP, should I expect, or should a customer expect, should anyone expect, that over, say, a 12-month period, on average, that should not things balance out where it should be net zero? Or, well, answer that first.
The utilization, it's really a matter of how are you sharing the cost at the time. So if the cost at the time go down, everybody's share goes down. It just depends on, it's about the sharing mechanism. It's a variation in sharing mechanism from just splicing your 100% up differently amongst your customers. It's not so much of, does that guide the final bill? That's just who's the cost attributable to, whose usage.
Right, but if I understood it though, instead of going, your max peak, whatever that is, typically it's been in the winter, it's going to be a monthly average, and you've got 12 monthly averages.
That's right.
So, whereas lighting, I'm sure never was a thought relative to peaking. Now, because of that average, it could be.
That's correct.
Well, I guess what I'll do, I'll save this question for maybe ORS could answer, like, okay, we've done this, you've done this, you've only had, 12, 13, 14 months. Is this in the customer's best interest or not?
Well, some customers, it's just a matter of which customers are paying which slices. It's like taking your pie, giving some of them a small piece, depending on their usage. So it's just a shift in how you're slicing your pie. Some are going up, some are going down, and that will vary year over year as their usage contributes to peak differently. So it's just a shift of gears. It's not so much everybody's getting a benefit. It's just, we're just reallocating things differently.
I understand. I think I do, pretty sure I do, but
It's the same pie. It's the same pie. It's.
Thank you, Ms. Harrington. Thank you so much. No more questions, Madam Chair.
One last thing, Ms. Reed, I appreciate you filing your Exhibit 1, showing the changes to the fuel rider. But there is language, and I recall this from the customer complaint. There's language in the area lighting service riders that says the DERP charge will be charged. So there are a lot of other schedules out there that need to be looked at as well. Are y'all aware of that?
Yes.
I feel like you are. I'm not telling you anything y'all don't know.
Yes.
But just be aware.
I don't know if it may have been a discovery question from the ORS.
Okay.
We said that we would strike that paragraph from ALS, SLS, SLR, and the sports field lighting schedule.
And I thought there was some testimony of that, but I couldn't find it just now. So
Right. I thought so too, but I remember for sure in our data request we did respond to that, and
well,
we
we
were
don't
aware
get to
of that.
see those unless y'all put them into evidence. So.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Trawick, do you have a redirect? Because if you do, can we do it after lunch?
I have 2 questions, understanding I'm standing between us and lunch.
All right, sir. Go ahead.
Very brief.
I'm a count.
Ms. Reed, is the company continuing to evaluate this DERP overcharge issue?
Yes, we are.
And will the company continue to engage with ORS to make sure we have an appropriate resolution to that issue?
Yes, we will.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Trawick. Ladies, thank you. I'm sorry that if this was a painful experience, but thank you both for your candor
Thank you.
and answering our questions, and you may stand down.
Thank you.
Does that complete?
That completes the company's case, Madam Chair.
Thank you. We're going to break for lunch. Let's come back. I say lunch. I don't. What's the opposite of brunch after lunch? But let's break until 3 o'clock, please. We'll be back at 3 o'clock. Thank you.